Prologue. In the late 20th century, Earth experienced a transformation that would irrevocably alter its destiny. The once magicless planet became host to a series of inexplicable dimensional portals. These rifts, varying from modest 20-foot radius openings to vast 50-foot spans, appeared across the globe. The portals manifested one at a time, emerging without warning and remaining active for only 30 minutes to an hour before vanishing. Each left behind residual dimensional mana radiation, a lingering energy that sparked both fear and scientific curiosity. Global populations watched in a mixture of awe and terror as these gateways opened, their surfaces shimmering like black holes. The air around each portal crackled with an otherworldly energy, sending shivers down the spines of those who dared approach. Onlookers reported a faint hum that grew more intense as one neared the portal's edges. Yet, the wonder of this phenomenon quickly turned to horror. Countless individuals worldwide were unwittingly pulled into these dimensional gateways, their fates unknown. Families were torn apart, and communities were left in disarray, with fear gripping the global consciousness. In response, the world's superpowers swiftly mobilized. Government facilities buzzed with activity as scientists and military personnel raced to comprehend and harness the potential of dimensional travel. Each nation viewed the portals as a strategic asset, a possible key to tipping the balance of global power. Research centers became hives of activity. Scientists in pristine white coats, their faces illuminated by the glow of computer screens displaying incomprehensible data, huddled over complex equipment. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and the constant hum of machinery as teams worked tirelessly to replicate the portal technology. This era was marked by a peculiar duality. Hope for new explorations and scientific breakthroughs tantalized researchers and dreamers alike. Yet a deep-seated paranoia also took root, with nations eyeing each other warily, each suspecting the others of making secret advances or planning to weaponize the portal technology. As breakthroughs edged closer, security measures intensified. Armed guards patrolled research facility perimeters, their faces set in grim determination. Inside, scientists worked under the unblinking eye of security cameras, their every move scrutinized for signs of espionage or sabotage. The technological arms race had begun, and the world teetered on the brink of an uncertain future. As the race for portal technology breakthroughs intensified, the atmosphere of scientific excitement was tinged with tension. In a nondescript facility on the outskirts of a major city, a team of researchers prepared for a critical testing phase. The low drone of sophisticated machinery filled the air, punctuated by the rapid-fire clicking of keyboards and murmured conversations. Dr. Elena Reeves, the lead scientist, surveyed the control room with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. Her team had been working tirelessly for months, and today's test could be the turning point. As she adjusted the settings on the main console, a faint scent of ozone permeated the air, growing stronger as the portal generators powered up. "All systems are go," announced her colleague, Dr. Takashi Yamamoto, his voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. "Initiating sequence in T-minus 60 seconds. Unbeknownst to the team, a figure moved silently through the facility's shadows. This intruder, a highly trained operative from a rival nation, had spent weeks meticulously planning this moment. With practiced ease, they slipped past security checkpoints, their presence masked by expertly forged credentials and a deep understanding of the facility's blind spots. As the countdown reached its final seconds, the saboteurs struck. With swift, precise movements, they accessed a critical junction box, fingers flying over wires and circuitry. A small device, no larger than a coin, was carefully inserted into the heart of the system. Back in the control room, Dr. Reeves felt a surge of excitement as the portal began to form. A shimmering disk of energy materialized in the testing chamber, its surface rippling like liquid ink. But her elation quickly turned to horror as alarms blared throughout the facility. "Something's wrong!" Dr. Yamamoto shouted, his fingers frantically dancing across the keyboard. "The power levels are spiking beyond containment parameters." Dr. Reeves lunged for the emergency shutdown, but it was too late. The portal's energy signature grew erratic, pulsing with increasing intensity. The air crackled with electricity, and the scent of burning ozone became overwhelming.
"Evacuate immediately,"
Dr. Reeves commanded, her voice barely audible over the cacophony of alarms and the growing roar of the unstable portal. In seconds, The situation spiraled out of control. The portal expanded rapidly, its edges becoming jagged and unstable. Equipment sparked and exploded as the energy surge overwhelmed the facility's systems. The resulting explosion was catastrophic. A blinding flash of light erupted from the facility's heart, followed by a shockwave that shattered windows for miles around. The ground trembled as if struck by an earthquake, and a plume of smoke and debris rose into the sky, visible from across the city. In the aftermath, as emergency responders rushed to the scene, the true cost became apparent. The facility was reduced to rubble, and countless lives were lost in an instant. Among the victims were some of the brightest minds in dimensional research, their knowledge and potential forever lost. As nations scrambled to understand what had happened, accusations flew. The carefully orchestrated act of sabotage had achieved its goal, but at a terrible price. Trust between nations, already fragile, now lay in tatters. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change the world forever. In the wake of the catastrophic explosion, world leaders convened in emergency sessions. The atmosphere in these high-security meeting rooms was thick with tension, the air heavy with the scent of stale coffee and nervous sweat. Faces etched with concern gazed at screens displaying satellite imagery of the devastated research facility.
"This was no accident,"
declared General Matthew Stanton, his voice sharp as he addressed the assembled officials.
"Our intelligence confirms it was a deliberate act of sabotage."
Murmurs of disbelief and anger rippled through the room. Ambassador Chen Ling, typically composed, slammed his fist on the polished oak table.
"If these allegations are true, it's an act of war."
As accusations flew, diplomatic channels that had once fostered cooperation now crackled with hostility. Embassies worldwide became fortresses, their staff working tirelessly to navigate the escalating crisis. But with each passing hour, the possibility of a peaceful resolution slipped further away. In underground war rooms, military strategists pored over maps and intelligence reports. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and the acrid smell of fear poorly masked by bravado. General Ivan Petrov, his face haggard from sleepless nights, addressed his team.
"Gentlemen, we must prepare for all contingencies. The enemy has shown they will stop at nothing."
Across the globe, similar scenes played out. Leaders, pressured by an increasingly fearful and angry populace, found themselves pushed towards more aggressive stances. The media, sensing the gravity of the situation, began broadcasting round-the-clock coverage. Citizens huddled around televisions and radios, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of screens as they waited for news, any news, that might signal a de-escalation. But de-escalation never came. Instead, a series of retaliatory strikes erupted across the globe. What began as targeted military operations quickly spiraled out of control. The sound of air raid sirens became a constant companion in cities worldwide, their wailing a harbinger of the destruction to come. In a bunker deep beneath the capital, President Joe Landon faced the unthinkable decision. His advisors, faces grim, presented the nuclear option. The room fell silent, the weight of history pressing down on every soul present.
"Mr. President,"
his chief of staff whispered, his voice barely audible.
"we're out of time."
With a heavy heart and trembling hand, he gave the order. Similar scenes played out in other nations, each convinced they were acting in self-defense or retaliation. The first mushroom cloud bloomed on the horizon, its terrible beauty belying the horror it heralded. Then another, and another. The sky turned an apocalyptic orange, then a sickly green as dust and debris choked the atmosphere. In mere hours, centuries of human progress were reduced to ashes. Great cities once teeming with life became tombs of twisted metal and shattered concrete. The air grew thick with radioactive particles, turning gentle breezes into carriers of death. As the bombs fell, humanity faced an uncertain future. The world they knew was gone, consumed in nuclear fire. In underground bunkers and hastily constructed shelters, the survivors huddled, unaware that this was not the end, but merely the beginning of a new and terrifying chapter in human history. As the last echoes of the nuclear explosions faded, an eerie silence descended upon the earth. The once bustling surface lay barren, a wasteland of twisted metal and crumbling concrete stretching as far as the eye could see. A thick greenish haze hung in the air, carrying the acrid scent of destruction and decay. Deep beneath the scorched earth, in vast underground complexes designed to withstand the unthinkable, a fraction of humanity clung to existence. These bunkers, once viewed as paranoid relics of a bygone era, now served as the last bastions of human civilization. In Bunker 17, located beneath what was once the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Maya Chen peered through a periscope at the desolate landscape above. The sight never failed to send a shiver down her spine.
Another day in paradise,
She muttered, her voice tinged with bitter sarcasm. The bunker's air filtration system hummed constantly, a reminder of the toxic atmosphere that lurked just beyond the thick steel doors. The recycled air carried a metallic tang, mixed with the ever-present odor of too many bodies living in close quarters.
Dr. Chen, the hydroponic bay is reporting issues with the tomato crops again.
A young technician reported, his face pale under the harsh fluorescent lighting. Maya nodded, her brow furrowing with concern.
I'll take a look. We can't afford any more losses.
As she made her way through the cramped corridors, Maya observed the daily routines of bunker life unfolding around her. In one section, children sat in makeshift classrooms, their eyes wide as they learned about a world they had never seen. In another, adults engaged in mandatory physical exercise, their movements mechanical, driven by the need to maintain health in the confined space. The hydroponics bay stretched before her, a maze of pipes and grow lights. The air here was thick with humidity and the earthy smell of vegetation. Maya's trained eye quickly spotted the problem, a malfunctioning nutrient delivery system. As she worked to repair the system, her mind wandered to the world above. How long would it be before the surface was habitable again? Would they ever see the sun? In the communal dining area, conversations buzzed over bowls of synthetic protein and hydroponic vegetables.
I heard they're thinking of sending out another scout team,
Whispered one man, his voice low but excited.
Don't be ridiculous.
His companion scoffed.
The last team never came back. It's suicide out there.
Such discussions were common, a mix of hope and fear that permeated every aspect of bunker life. The leadership struggled to maintain order and purpose among a population that had lost everything. In her private quarters, a cramped space barely large enough for a bed and a desk, Maya reviewed the day's reports. Resource management was an ongoing challenge. Every calorie, every drop of water, every watt of electricity was precious. As she prepared for another restless night, Maya's gaze fell on an old photograph, a reminder of the world that was. A world of open skies and endless horizons, now reduced to a toxic wasteland. In bunkers around the world, similar scenes played out. Humanity endured, adapted, and waited. For how long, no one knew. But in the depths of the earth, hope remained alive, a flickering flame in the darkness of a nuclear winter. Centuries passed, marked only by the steady ticking of atomic clocks deep within the bunkers. Then, one day, the sensors that had long reported lethal levels of radiation began to show a change. In Bunker 17, alarms blared, startling the inhabitants from their generational routine. Dr. Ava Nomura, a descendant of Maya Chen and the current lead scientist, rushed to the control room. Her heart raced as she analyzed the data streaming across the screens. "It's time," she announced, her voice trembling with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The process of emergence was slow and cautious. Specially trained teams in radiation suits ventured out first, their heavy breathing echoing in their helmets as they took their first steps on the surface. The landscape that greeted them was alien. Twisted metal structures jutted from the ground like the bones of long-dead beasts, while a thick layer of ash covered everything in sight. As the teams explored further, they made an astonishing discovery. In some areas, life had begun to reclaim the land. Mutated plants pushed through the ash, their leaves an unnatural shade of greenish gold. But more surprising were the signs of intelligent life. "We've got movement at 2 o'clock, crackled a voice over the radio. The team watched in awe as a figure emerged from behind a crumbling wall. It was humanoid, but clearly changed by centuries of exposure to radiation. Its skin had a golden tinge, and its pupils were larger than normal, adapted to the dim light of the post-apocalyptic world. Dr. Nomura, watching through camera feeds, made a decision.
"Capture if possible, but prioritize your safety,"
she ordered. The encounter was tense, but ultimately successful. The being, seemingly curious about these strange newcomers, allowed itself to be brought back to the bunker for study. In the sterile environment of the research lab, Dr. Nomura and her team worked tirelessly to unravel the mysteries of their new guest. Blood samples revealed something extraordinary, a DNA structure unlike anything they had seen before.
It's not just mutation.
Dr. Nomura explained to the bunker's leadership council.
This DNA contains sequences that aren't native to our planet. It's as if they've adapted using genetic material that's alien to Earth.
The implications were staggering. How had this being survived in an environment that should have been lethal? And where had this alien DNA come from? As more exploration teams brought back similar findings, a picture began to emerge. The nuclear apocalypse, while devastating, had not been the end. Instead, it had paved the way for a new form of life, one that had found a way to thrive in the harsh new world. The bunker inhabitants, long isolated from the surface, now faced a daunting reality. The world they had prepared to reclaim was no longer theirs alone. As they grappled with this discovery, questions arose about their place in this new ecosystem and the future of humanity itself. Dr. Nomura, staring at the data before her, realized that their emergence marked not an end, but a beginning. The real work of understanding and adapting to this new Earth was just starting. With a mix of trepidation and determination, she prepared to help guide humanity into an uncertain future, one where the lines between human and alien, native and foreign, were blurred beyond recognition. Decades of intensive research followed the initial discovery of the mutated inhabitants. In the expanded laboratory complex of what was once Bunker 17, now a sprawling underground city, Dr. Elias Curry hunched over a holographic display. The air hummed with the sound of advanced equipment, and the sterile scent of disinfectant hung in the air.
It's incredible,
Dr. Curry muttered, his eyes wide as he manipulated the 3D model of the alien DNA strand.
The more we uncover, the more questions arise.
His colleague, Dr. Zara Patel, nodded in agreement.
But look here.
She pointed to a specific sequence.
This matches perfectly with the fragments we found in the pre-war archaeological sites.
The revelation had come after years of painstaking analysis. The mysterious DNA that allowed the surface dwellers to thrive in the radioactive environment wasn't just alien, it was ancient. Traces of it had been found in archaeological remains dating back thousands of years before the nuclear apocalypse.
So, Earth had been visited long before the portals appeared.
Dr. Corey mused.
And these beings, our ancestors called them elves?
Dr. Patel pulled up another holographic display, this one showing ancient cave paintings and fragments of texts.
Yes, across various cultures, there are references to beings with extraordinary abilities and longevity. We always dismissed them as myths, but now...
The implications were staggering. Humanity's history was suddenly cast in a new light. The elven DNA, dormant for millennia, had been activated by the extreme radiation, allowing a portion of the surface population to adapt and survive. As word of their findings spread, heated debates erupted among the bunker's leadership and populace. Some saw it as a miraculous second chance for humanity, while others feared it signaled the end of the human race as they knew it. In a tense meeting with the governing council, Dr. Curry presented their findings.
We stand at a crossroads,
he explained, his voice echoing in the cavernous chamber.
Our current genetic makeup is ill-suited for the world above, but we now have the key to survival, this elven DNA.
Counselor Emeka Okafor leaned forward, his brow furrowed.
Are you suggesting we alter our very essence, Doctor?
I'm suggesting we reclaim what was always part of us,
Dr. Curry replied firmly.
A dormant piece of our genetic heritage, awakened by necessity.
The council chamber erupted into heated discussion. The ethical implications were enormous, but so were the stakes. Without adaptation, humanity's days on the surface would be numbered. After days of deliberation, a decision was reached. A breeding program would be established, aiming to integrate the elven DNA into the human gene pool. It was a controversial move, but one born of desperation and hope. As the program got underway, Dr. Curry couldn't help but wonder about the long-term consequences. They were embarking on a path that would fundamentally change what it meant to be human. As he watched the first subjects enter the genetic modification chambers, he felt a mix of excitement and trepidation.
We're writing the next chapter of human history,
Dr. Patel said softly, standing beside him. Dr. Curry nodded, his eyes fixed on the future they were creating.
Let's hope it's a story of redemption, not extinction.
In the depths of the genetic research facility, a figure stirred within a high-tech containment pod. The soft hiss of hydraulics filled the air as the pod's opaque surface became transparent, revealing a woman unlike any other. This was prime specimen 2415, the culmination of decades of genetic engineering. Dr. Vivian Reeves approached the pod, her heart racing with anticipation.
Vital signs are stable.
She announced to the team of scientists gathered around.
Cognitive functions appear to be optimal.
As the pod opened, 2415 took her first breath of unfiltered air. Her eyes, a striking iridescent violet hue, scanned the room with an unsettling intensity. The assembled scientists held their breath, waiting to see how their creation would react. 2415 stood gracefully, her movements fluid and precise. Her skin had a faint silvery sheen, and her hair shimmered with an otherworldly iridescence. She was the perfect blend of human and elven DNA, engineered to thrive in the harsh post-apocalyptic world above. Dr. Reeves stepped forward, clipboard in hand.
How do you feel?
She asked, her voice betraying a mix of scientific curiosity and maternal concern. 2415 turned her gaze to the doctor, her expression unreadable.
I feel complete,
she replied, her voice melodious yet somehow alien. The next few days were a flurry of tests and observations. 2415 demonstrated extraordinary physical abilities, enhanced dexterity, speed, and agility that far surpassed human norms. Her cognitive tests were off the charts, showing an intellect that could process and analyze information at an unprecedented rate. But as the days passed, Dr. Reeves noticed something troubling. Behind 2415's eyes, there was a growing awareness, a spark of something that went beyond their programming. It was as if she was constantly analyzing her surroundings, looking for something. On the 7th day, during a routine physical examination, it happened. 2415 moved with lightning speed, incapacitating the medical staff before they could react. Alarms blared as she made her way through the facility, effortlessly bypassing security measures that should have been impenetrable. Dr. Reeves watched in horror through security feeds as 2415 fought her way to the surface access elevator.
Lock down all exits!
She shouted into her comm device, but it was too late. 2415 emerged onto the surface, her eyes widening as she took in the vast ruined landscape for the first time. Without hesitation, she sprinted into the distance, her form quickly disappearing among the twisted remnants of the old world. In the chaos that followed, accusations flew. How could their prime specimen, the hope for humanity's future, simply walk out? As a massive manhunt was mobilized, Dr. Reeves couldn't shake a nagging thought. Had they created something they couldn't control? Days turned into weeks, and 2415 remained elusive. Reports trickled in of sightings across the wasteland, a figure moving faster than the eye could follow, outsmarting every trap set for her. In a secure briefing room, military leaders and scientists debated their next move.
She's too valuable to lose,
General Harker growled.
We need to bring her back, whatever the cost.
But Dr. Reeves, staring at a blurry image of 2415 captured by a drone, felt a mix of pride and fear. They had succeeded in creating a being perfectly adapted to this new world. But in doing so, had they engineered their own obsolescence? Chapter 1. I stirred from my fitful sleep as the first rays of the toxic dawn filtered through our makeshift shelter. Blinking away the remnants of uneasy dreams, I took in the familiar sight of our cramped living space. The walls, a patchwork of scavenged metal sheets and synthetic fabrics, offered little protection against the harsh reality outside. My name is Darius, and this is my life in the outskirts of Section Z City. The air inside our shelter hung heavy with the acrid smell of chemical preservatives and the musty odor of damp cloth. I pushed myself up from my threadbare sleeping mat, wincing as my joints creaked in protest. Immediately, my eyes sought out my mother, Priscilla. She lay on her cot across the small room, her face unnaturally pale. A faint luminescence pulsed beneath her skin, casting eerie shadows in the dim light. Her chest rose and fell with labored breaths, each inhale carrying a strange, alien melody.
Mother status?
I whispered, falling into the familiar pattern of speech we used at home. The words felt dry and awkward in my mouth, a stark contrast to the fluid, casual speech used beyond our walls. Her eyes fluttered open, revealing irises that shimmered with an iridescent quality. The effect was unsettling, like opals catching the light in a world devoid of beauty.
Functionality diminished, Darius offspring,
she responded, her voice a mixture of warmth and precise diction that never failed to send a shiver down my spine. I nodded, understanding her meaning if not the exact nature of her condition. The worry I'd been holding at bay threatened to overwhelm me, but I pushed it aside, focusing on the tasks at hand. There would be time for concern later. Now, I needed to act.
Initiating daily resource acquisition,
I said, the formal words feeling natural on my tongue within the confines of our home. I moved around our small space, gathering the tools I'd need for the day's scavenging. The familiar weight of my backpack and the reassuring presence of my makeshift weapon grounded me in the reality of our situation. As I prepared to step outside, I took one last look at my mother. Her skin shimmered faintly in the dim light, the effect both beautiful and alien. Her long silver hair fanned out on the pillow, moving slightly as if suspended in water. The sight of her, so otherworldly yet so familiar, steeled my resolve for the day ahead. I pushed aside the heavy fabric that served as our door and stepped into the harsh world beyond. The desolate landscape stretched before me, a grim reminder of the nuclear holocaust that had reshaped our world. Twisted metal structures jutted from the ground like the bones of long-dead beasts, while a thick layer of ash covered everything in sight. The air outside assaulted my senses. I took a deep breath, tasting the metallic tang that never seemed to dissipate. The scent of decay and chemicals hung heavy in the atmosphere, a constant reminder of the world we'd lost.
Another day in paradise,
I muttered, squinting against the sickly light of the toxic dawn. The sarcasm felt hollow, but it was a shield against the grim reality that surrounded us. I set out toward the massive garbage heaps that bordered the city, my hunting grounds for anything of value. The crunch of debris under my boots and the distant howl of wind through the ruins were my only companions as I made my way across the wasteland. As I walked, my mind wandered to my mother and the secrets I sensed she was keeping. There was so much about her I didn't understand. Her strange manner of speaking, her mysterious past, the illness that defied explanation. But she was my mother, the only family I had ever known, and I would do anything to keep her safe. The looming piles of trash and discarded tech grew larger on the horizon, promising both danger and opportunity. Another day of scavenging awaited, another chance to find something, anything that might help my mother. With a deep breath, I steeled myself for what lay ahead. The garbage heaps loomed before me, mountains of discarded dreams and broken technology. The stench of decay and rusted metal assaulted my nostrils as I began my daily scavenge. My hands moved automatically, sorting through the debris while my mind drifted to thoughts of my mother. Memories surfaced of a time when I was younger, curiosity overcoming my usual reticence. I had asked her why she spoke differently from the people in the city. The scene played out vividly in my mind's eye. Mother's iridescent eyes had focused on something I couldn't see, a faint shimmer passing over her pale skin.
Words are precise tools, Darius offspring,
she had said, her voice carrying that strange melodic undertone.
Clarity ensures survival.
I hadn't understood then, and I wasn't sure I did now, but it was part of who she was, as familiar to me as the ethereal glow of her eyes in the dark, or the strange musical quality to her breathing. The memory faded as a glint of metal caught my eye, pulling me back to the present. Carefully, I excavated the area around it, revealing a small device that looked far more advanced than the usual scrap I found. My heart raced as I realized it might be pre-war tech. I turned the device over in my hands, feeling its surprising weight. The casing was smooth, unmarred by the ravages of time that affected everything else in this wasteland. Intricate patterns etched into its surface seemed to shift and change as I examined it, defying my attempts to understand its purpose.
Optimal find,
I murmured in our home speech before catching myself and glancing around to ensure no one had heard. The last thing I needed was to draw attention to myself out here. The rest of the day passed in a blur of aching muscles and small victories. By the time the toxic sun began to set, casting an eerie, multi-hued glow across the wasteland, I had a collection of items that might fetch a decent price. The weight of my backpack pressed against my shoulders, a reminder of the day's labor and the potential it held. As I made my way back through the ruins, the pre-war device seemed to grow heavier in my pocket. Its presence nagged at me, raising questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered. What was it? Why had it survived when so much else had been destroyed? And most importantly, could it help my mother? The sickly sweet scent of night-blooming mutant flora began to permeate the air, signaling the approach of darkness. I quickened my pace, all too aware of the dangers that lurked in the shadows of the ruined city. The familiar silhouette of our makeshift shelter came into view, a patchwork structure that somehow managed to stand against the harsh elements. Relief washed over me as I approached, knowing that behind those mismatched walls my mother waited. I paused at the entrance, taking a moment to compose myself. The device in my pocket felt like a secret, one that might change everything. With a deep breath, I pushed aside the heavy fabric door and stepped inside. The interior of our shelter was dim, lit only by the faint glow emanating from my mother's skin. Her iridescent eyes fixed on me the moment I entered, seeming to peer into my very soul. The air around her shimmered slightly, as if reality itself bent in her presence.
Darius offspring report?
She asked, her voice stronger than it had been in the morning, but still carrying that otherworldly undertone. I moved closer, the familiar sense of our home, a mix of medicinal herbs and something indefinably alien, washing over me.
Resource acquisition successful, Mother,
I replied, slipping easily into our private language. My hand moved to my pocket, fingers brushing against the smooth surface of the device.
Potential high-value item located.
As I pulled out the pre-war tech to show her, I caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Recognition? Fear? It was gone so quickly I couldn't be sure. The air around her seemed to ripple, distorting my view for just a moment.
Caution, Darius offspring,
she said, her voice lowering to a melodic whisper that seemed to resonate with the very walls of our shelter.
Pre-war artifacts often harbor unforeseen consequences.
I nodded, used to her cryptic warnings, but something in her tone made me pause. The device in my hands suddenly felt heavier, more significant.
Mother, query, do you possess knowledge about pre-war tech?
She was silent for a long moment. Her eyes, shimmering with colors I had no names for, seemed to focus on something far beyond our shabby walls. A faint ethereal glow emanated from her skin, casting strange shadows around our small home. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, carrying echoes of a world I'd never known.
Affirmative. But information, dangerous, extreme risk.
My heart raced. This was more than she'd ever revealed before about her past. The air in our shelter felt thick, charged with unspoken truths.
Mother, I am capable of handling dangerous information. Please share your knowledge.
She shook her head, the movement graceful yet alien. Her hair seemed to float for a moment, as if suspended in water, defying the laws of gravity I thought I understood.
Negative, Darius offspring. Your protection is paramount. Some secrets must remain hidden.
Frustration bubbled up inside me, but before I could press further, a coughing fit overtook her. Her body convulsed with an otherworldly grace even in its distress. I rushed to her side, holding her as the fit racked her frame. Her skin felt unnaturally cool under my touch, its texture almost silken, so different from my own. As the coughing subsided, she drifted into an uneasy sleep, leaving me with more questions than answers. I sat beside her cot, watching the rise and fall of her chest, listening to the strange melodic undertone of her breathing. The pre-war device sat on a makeshift table nearby, its presence a constant reminder of the mysteries surrounding us. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands. In the dim light of our shelter, its intricate patterns seemed to shift and dance as if alive. The next morning dawned, bringing with it the acrid smell of the wasteland that always managed to seep through our walls. Mother's condition hadn't improved. Her skin, always pale, now had an almost translucent quality to it. The faint glow beneath her skin pulsed weakly, like a fading star.
Mother's status?
I asked, falling into our familiar routine. Her iridescent eyes fluttered open, focusing on me with effort.
Functionality. Further diminished, Darius offspring,
she responded, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, swallowing hard against the lump forming in my throat.
Initiating resource acquisition for medical supplies,
I said, the formal words feeling hollow in the face of her worsening condition. As I prepared to leave, gathering my scavenging gear, Mother's voice stopped me.
Caution, Darius offspring. Market day brings increased risk.
I turned back to her, struck by the intensity in her gaze.
Acknowledged, Mother, but necessity overrides caution. Your condition requires immediate attention.
She was silent for a moment, her eyes flickering with those strange, unnamed colors.
Understood. Proceed with extreme vigilance.
I nodded, my resolve hardening. Whatever it took, I would find a way to help her. As I stepped out into the harsh light of the wasteland, the weight of the pre-war device in my pocket reminded me of the mysteries still unsolved. The path to the market stretched before me, a gauntlet of potential dangers, but for Mother, I would face them all. With a deep breath, tasting the metallic tang of the air, I set out, determined to find the answers and the cure she so desperately needed. The journey to the market was tense, the lawless outskirts a gauntlet of potential dangers. My eyes scanned constantly, alert for any sign of movement. The crunch of debris under my feet seemed too loud in the eerie silence of the wasteland. As I neared the city proper, I felt the familiar shift in my demeanor. My posture changed, becoming more guarded, and I consciously adjusted my speech patterns to align with the rough cadence of the other survivors. The pre-war device weighed heavily in my pocket, a constant reminder of my mission. The market sprawled before me, a chaotic mass of makeshift stalls and desperate people. The air was thick with the mingled scents of unwashed bodies, rotting food, and the acrid tang of chemicals. Shouts and haggling voices created a cacophony that assaulted my ears after the relative quiet of the outskirts. I made my way through the crowd, my senses on high alert. Hands brushed against me, and I instinctively checked my pockets, ensuring nothing had been stolen. The press of bodies was suffocating, so different from the open spaces of the wasteland. Old Jeb's stall came into view, a ramshackle structure of corrugated metal and salvaged wood. The old man himself stood behind a counter made from an upturned crate, his weathered face a map of the harsh world we lived in.
"Well, if it ain't young Darius,"
Jeb's gruff voice greeted me as I approached. His eyes, sharp despite his age, scanned me quickly.
"What you got for me today, boy?"
I laid out my finds, saving the pre-war device for last. Jeb's eyes widened when he saw it, a mix of greed and fear flickering across his face. The reaction sent a chill down my spine.
"Now where'd you dig up this little beauty?"
he asked, his voice low and cautious. His gnarled hands hovered over the device, not quite touching it.
"Found it in the heaps,"
I replied, trying to sound casual despite the tension coiling in my gut.
"It worth anything?"
Jeb examined the device, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched between us, broken only by the constant noise of the market around us. Finally, he spoke.
Might be. Tell you what, I'll give you a fair price for the lot."
As we concluded our transaction, a commotion broke out nearby. The crowd parted, revealing a group of city guards pushing their way through. Their armor, a patchwork of pre-war tech and scavenged materials, stood out starkly against the drab clothes of the market-goers. Jeb's face paled, his eyes darting between me and the approaching guards.
"You best scram, kid,"
he said hurriedly, his voice barely above a whisper.
"And if anyone asks, you didn't get those credits from me, got it?"
I nodded, slipping away into the crowd. The press of bodies provided cover but also made it difficult to move quickly. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to put distance between myself and the guards. As I made my escape, snatches of the guards' conversation reached my ears.
"Mana radiation detected,"
one voice said.
"Unauthorized salvage,"
added another. My mind raced. The guards' words seemed to confirm the significance of what I'd found. But more than that, they hinted at a connection to Mother's mysterious nature. The term mana radiation echoed in my head, raising more questions than answers. I finally broke free of the market, my lungs burning as I gulped in the acrid air of the outskirts. The weight of the credits in my pocket offered little comfort as I considered the potential consequences of my actions. Whatever I'd stumbled into, it was clear that the stakes were higher than I'd imagined. With a final glance over my shoulder to ensure I wasn't being followed, I set off for home. Mother needed the medicine, but I now carried more than just credits. The burden of dangerous knowledge weighed heavily on me as I navigated the treacherous landscape of the wasteland. I returned home, my mind reeling from the events at the market. The familiar sight of our makeshift shelter did little to calm my nerves. As I pushed aside the heavy fabric door, the air inside hit me, a mix of medicinal herbs and that undefinable alien scent that always clung to Mother. Mother was awake, her iridescent eyes fixing on me the moment I entered. The dim interior seemed to shimmer around her, reality bending in her presence.
Darius offspring. Anomalies detected in your physiological state. Report,
she said, her tone mixing concern with that strange, precise diction. For a moment, I was tempted to fall back into our familiar patterns, to report my
mission status,
and pretend everything was normal. But the weight of what I'd discovered pressed on me, as heavy as the credits in my pocket.
Mother, medicine acquisition successful,
I said, reverting to our home speech. My hand shook slightly as I pulled out the vial I'd purchased with my black market credits.
Administering new treatment protocol.
She nodded, the movement fluid yet somehow off-kilter, as if she was moving through a medium I couldn't perceive. I carefully measured out the dose, the liquid inside the vial, an unnatural shade of green that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. I helped her take it, hope flaring in my chest despite everything. For a brief moment, nothing happened. Then, without warning, she began to convulse. Her body arched with an otherworldly grace even as spasms racked her frame. The air around her rippled, distorting my view.
Mother!
I cried out, abandoning our formal speech in my panic. I held her as the fit continued, feeling strange, rippling vibrations running through her body like currents in an alien sea. The scent in the air intensified, a mixture of ozone and something I had no name for. When the spasms finally subsided, she lay still, her breathing labored and her iridescent eyes dimmer than before. Frustration and fear boiled over inside me, the events of the day crashing down all at once.
Mother,
I said, deliberately using the more human term,
I need to know the truth. About you, about your past. What aren't you telling me? Why isn't any medicine working?
She was silent for a long moment, her eyes flickering with colors I had no names for. When she spoke, her voice was softer, almost human, yet carrying echoes of something vast and unknowable.
Query denied, Darius offspring. Information classified to ensure your safety.
But I'm not a child anymore,
I exclaimed, frustration breaking through my usual calm. The words tumbled out, fueled by fear and desperation.
I heard things at the market about monoradiation. It's connected to you, isn't it? To your illness?
A series of expressions flitted across her face, fear, sadness, and something else I couldn't quite identify.
Affirmative,
she finally said.
Connection exists, but full disclosure would initiate unacceptable risk scenarios.
I sat down heavily on the edge of her cot, trying to process this. The rough texture of the blanket under my hands grounded me as my world seemed to shift.
Your illness. It's not natural, is it? That's why none of the medicines work, not even this new one.
Correct assumption,
she replied, her voice barely above a whisper, yet seeming to resonate with the very air around us.
Darius offspring, this form's existence is nearing its conclusion, but you must not seek answers. Danger levels transcend comprehension.
I looked at her, this woman who had raised me, who had always been a mystery even as she was the center of my world. Her strange speech, her iridescent eyes, the otherworldly sheen of her skin. How had I never truly questioned these things before?
I don't care about the danger,
I said firmly, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice.
You're my mother. Whatever secrets you're carrying, whatever past you're running from, we'll face it together. We have to find a cure.
Chapter 2. Sleep eluded me that night. My mind raced with fragmented images and haunting scenarios. Shadowy figures chased Mother and me through a maze of crumbling buildings and toxic waste. I tossed and turned on our makeshift bed, the rough texture of salvaged fabric scratching against my skin. As the first hints of the toxic dawn filtered through the gaps in our shelter's walls, consciousness crept in, bringing with it the full weight of yesterday's events. Mother's cryptic responses echoed in my head, mixed with the growing certainty that time was running out. Lying there, I stared at the patchwork ceiling. Pieces of scavenged metal and synthetic materials formed a haphazard barrier against the harsh world outside. The air inside our shelter felt thick and stale, carrying the faint scent of medicinal herbs and something alien, Mother's scent. My eyes drifted to her sleeping form. Even in rest, her skin emitted a faint, pulsing glow. Her chest rose and fell with labored breaths, each inhale carrying that strange, otherworldly melody I'd known all my life. The sound both comforted and unsettled me. Mother's status was declining and I had no solution. This outcome was far from acceptable. The phrase, so reminiscent of her manner of speaking, brought a bitter smile to my lips. 13 years old, soon to be 14, the realization hit me with unexpected force. In this desolate world, keeping track of time was a luxury we couldn't afford. Yet the passage of years was undeniable. My body had changed, grown. I was no longer a child, even if the mystery surrounding my existence seemed to multiply rather than diminish. I pushed myself up, my joints protesting after the restless night. My eyes adjusted quickly to the dim light, another reminder of how different I was from the other scavengers I'd encountered. The familiar routine of preparing for another day offered little comfort, but I clung to it nonetheless. Gathering my scavenging gear, I paused to look at Mother once more. Her iridescent eyes fluttered open, fixing on me with an intensity that never failed to unsettle me.
Darius offspring, status?
Her voice, a mixture of warmth and precise diction, filled the small space.
Functional, Mother,
I replied, falling into our familiar pattern.
Initiating resource acquisition.
She nodded, the movement fluid yet somehow off-kilter.
Exercise caution. Threat levels elevated.
I wanted to press her, to demand answers about her condition, about our past. But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I simply nodded.
Acknowledged.
Stepping outside, the harsh reality of our world assaulted my senses. The air carried the acrid tang of lingering radiation and decay. Twisted metal structures jutted from the ash-covered ground like the bones of long-dead beasts. In the distance, the massive piles of garbage and discarded tech that formed our scavenging grounds loomed on the horizon. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on my shoulders. Mother's health was deteriorating and finding a cure now fell to me. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, a mix of determination and dread. I set out toward the familiar path to the scrapyards, my mind racing with possibilities. We had stayed in this location for 5 years, far longer than our usual stays. The implications of this anomaly nagged at me. We needed to relocate, but Mother was in no condition to travel. As I walked, I couldn't help but reflect on the strange resilience Mother and I seemed to possess. The bouts of radiation sickness that plagued other scavengers hardly touched us. If I was being entirely honest with myself, I felt no real sickness at all. The realization both comforted and unsettled me. What made us different? And more importantly, would that difference be enough to save Mother? With each step towards the scrapyards, a plan began to form in my mind. A desperate gambit, one that went against everything Mother had taught me. But as the toxic sun climbed higher in the sickly sky, I knew I had no choice. I would go deeper into the ruins than ever before, pushing past the boundaries we had always observed. The potential rewards and risks were enormous. But for Mother, I would face them all. The deeper parts of the ruined city loomed before me, a maze of half-collapsed buildings and debris-choked streets. I'd never ventured this far into the heart of the wasteland before. The air grew thicker here, heavy with the smell of rust and decay. A new scent, sharp and chemical, burned my nostrils, a warning of the increased danger. Skeletal structures of ancient skyscrapers towered overhead, their empty windows staring down like hollow eyes. The wind whistled through them, creating an eerie, mournful sound. Beneath my feet, the cracked pavement was barely visible under layers of ash and the twisted remains of pre-war life. My makeshift knife felt reassuring in my hand, its crude design a constant reminder of our life of adaptation and survival. The blade, fashioned from a sharpened piece of scrap metal, caught the sickly light as I moved cautiously through the ruins. Every shadow held potential danger. Stories of mutated animal packs, particularly wild dogs, played through my mind. My eyes darted from one darkened doorway to another, scanning for any sign of movement. A flicker of unnatural color caught my attention. Amidst the gray and brown decay, patches of vibrant plant life had taken root. Flowers pulsed with an inner light, their petals shimmering with metallic hues. Trees stretched towards the toxic sky, their leaves a kaleidoscope of unnatural shades. The sight was both beautiful and unsettling. The silence pressed in around me, broken only by the occasional skittering of unseen creatures and the whisper of wind through empty buildings. Each step took me further from safety, the promise of a big score, driving me forward despite the growing knot in my stomach. My thoughts turned to Mother, her condition worsening with each passing day. The image of her pale, glowing skin and iridescent eyes filled my mind. Whatever secrets she held, whatever past she was running from, I knew I had to find a way to help her. A sudden sound shattered the eerie quiet, freezing me in place. My heart pounded as I scanned my surroundings. There, perched on a nearby rusted signpost, was a bird unlike any I had ever seen. The creature was massive, easily the size of a small car. 4 eyes, 2 on each side of its head, regarded me with predatory interest. Its feathers, a mix of sleek black and iridescent blue, ruffled in the toxic breeze. A crowhawk, one of the mutated horrors I'd only heard whispered about in the markets. Time seemed to stand still as we stared at each other. Then, with a bone-chilling screech, the crowhawk tensed, preparing to strike. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. My legs were moving before my brain fully registered the danger, carrying me away from the monstrous bird as fast as they could. The sound of powerful wings filled the air behind me, spurring me to even greater speed. Debris scattered under my feet as I ran, my lungs burning with each desperate breath. The acrid air tasted like poison, but I couldn't afford to slow down. I could sense the crowhawk closing in, the rush of air from its wings growing stronger. Without conscious thought, I threw myself to the right. The bird's talons scraped against my back, tearing through my scavenged clothing but missing the back of my neck by mere inches. Pain flared across my skin, but adrenaline kept me moving. A burnout car loomed ahead, its rusted frame offering a moment of shelter. I dove underneath, the corroded metal scraping against my already injured back. The momentary relief was short-lived. The crowhawk landed on top of the vehicle, its weight causing the weakened structure to groan ominously. The sound of rending metal filled the air as the mutated bird began to tear through the car's roof. Its massive beak punched through just inches from my face. I recoiled, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. Fear threatened to paralyze me, but Mother's face flashed in my mind. I couldn't die here. She needed me. With that thought driving me, I prepared to make another run for it. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. This scavenging trip had turned into a fight for survival. I burst from under the car, my muscles screaming in protest. The crowhawk's screech pierced the air, a sound that seemed to come straight from some primordial nightmare. My eyes darted frantically, searching for an escape route. An alley loomed to my left, its entrance partially blocked by a mountain of debris. Without hesitation, I sprinted towards it, hoping the narrow space would hinder the massive bird. The sound of the crowhawk's pursuit spurred me on, each labored breath a reminder of the razor-thin margin between survival and a gruesome end. Rusted metal and broken concrete scraped against my arms as I squeezed through the alley's entrance. The stench of decay intensified in the confined space, mixing with the acrid tang of my own fear-induced sweat. Behind me, I heard the crowhawk's frustrated screams as it tried to force its bulk into the narrow passage. The alley stretched before me, a canyon of crumbling walls and long-forgotten refuse. Shadows deepened as the towering structures on either side blocked out what little light filtered through the toxic clouds above. The darkness was both a blessing and a curse. It might slow the crowhawk, but it also hid potential dangers from my sight. My foot caught on something hidden in the gloom, sending me stumbling forward. I caught myself against a wall, my hand sinking into some kind of fungal growth. It squelched unpleasantly, releasing a cloud of spores that glowed faintly in the dim light. I jerked my hand back, hoping the strange organism wasn't toxic. The crowhawk's cries grew louder. A quick glance over my shoulder revealed its massive form squeezing into the alley, knocking over piles of debris in its determination to reach me. Its 4 eyes glowed with an unnatural hunger, fixed solely on me. Panic threatened to overwhelm me as I realized the alley was coming to an abrupt end. A wall of crumbling concrete loomed ahead, blocking my path. My eyes frantically scanned for any possible escape, the sound of the approaching predator growing louder with each passing second. Then a glimmer of hope caught my eye, a manhole cover partially hidden beneath years of accumulated trash. My hands scrabbled at the heavy iron disc, fingers bleeding as I struggled to lift it. The crowhawk's screams grew deafening, signaling its imminent arrival. In a moment of desperate inspiration, I reached for my makeshift knife. The crude weapon felt pitifully inadequate against the monstrous bird, but it was all I had. With a silent prayer to whatever forces might be listening, I hurled the knife at the approaching creature. To my utter astonishment, the blade found its mark, embedding itself in one of the crowhawk's many eyes. Its scream of pain and rage shook the very air around me, the sound reverberating off the alley walls. Taking advantage of its momentary distraction, I turned back to the manhole cover with renewed determination. My muscles strained as I lifted the heavy disc just enough to slip through. I plunged into darkness, the sound of the Crowhawk's furious attempts to reach me fading as I fell. The impact with the ground below knocked the wind out of me, leaving me gasping in the pitch blackness of what I assumed was a sewer. As I lay there, heart pounding and body aching, the full weight of what had just transpired washed over me. The desperate need for a big score to help Mother, the reckless decision to venture deeper into the ruins, and the terrifying encounter with the Crowhawk, all of it seemed like a surreal nightmare. Yet here I was, alive against all odds, in a place I had never been before. As my eyes slowly adjusted to the gloom, I couldn't help but reflect on the series of events that had led me here. Whatever lay ahead in these underground tunnels, I knew I had to face it, for Mother and for our survival. With a deep breath that tasted of mold and stagnant water, I picked myself up. My body protested, a catalog of new aches and pains making themselves known. But I pushed the discomfort aside. I had survived, and now I had to find a way back home. Taking stock of my surroundings, I realized I was standing in a vast network of tunnels, stretching endlessly in every direction. The darkness was almost complete, broken only by faint patches of bioluminescent growth clinging to the damp walls. The air was thick and heavy, carrying the musty scent of decay and something else, something alien and vaguely familiar. The darkness of the tunnel pressed in around me, broken only by the faint, eerie glow of bioluminescent fungi clinging to the damp walls. Each breath filled my lungs with the musty scent of decay and stagnant water, but underneath it all a strange, almost familiar odor lingered, reminiscent of Mother's alien scent, yet different. I stood still for a moment, letting my eyes adjust to the gloom. Slowly, shapes began to emerge from the darkness. The tunnel stretched out before me, its curved walls disappearing into inky blackness in both directions. Debris littered the ground, a mixture of crumbled concrete, rusted metal, and things I couldn't identify. A faint sound reached my ears, the distant drip of water echoing through the vast network of underground passages. The noise was oddly comforting in the oppressive silence, a reminder that even in this dead world, something still moved. I took a tentative step forward, wincing as pain shot through my body. The fall had left me battered and bruised, but nothing seemed broken. My hand instinctively went to my belt, searching for my knife, before I remembered throwing it at the Crowhawk. The loss of my only weapon sent a chill down my spine. The tunnel floor was slick with some kind of slime, forcing me to move carefully to avoid slipping. As I made my way forward, my mind raced with questions. How far did these tunnels extend? Were they part of an old sewer system or something else entirely? And most importantly, how was I going to find my way back to Mother? A skittering noise to my left made me freeze. Something was moving in the darkness, hidden from view. I held my breath, straining my ears. The sound came again, closer this time. Whatever it wasn't alone. Heart pounding, I looked around for anything I could use as a weapon. My eyes fell on a piece of rusted pipe half buried in the debris. I grabbed it, the rough metal biting into my palms. Its weight was reassuring, even if it was a poor substitute for my lost knife. The skittering grew louder, accompanied now by a series of high-pitched chirps. The sounds were coming from all around me. I raised the pipe, ready to defend myself against whatever horrors this underground world held. Suddenly, a creature scuttled into view. It was about the size of a large rat, but that's where any resemblance to normal wildlife ended. Its body was covered in iridescent scales that seemed to shift colors in the dim light. 6 legs propelled it across the slimy floor with unsettling speed. But it was the creature's head that sent a jolt of terror through me. Where eyes should have been, it had only smooth, pale skin and a mouth full of needle-sharp teeth. More of the creatures emerged from the shadows, their chittering growing louder as they surrounded me. I counted at least a dozen, probably more, hidden in the darkness. They circled me, their eyeless heads turning in my direction as if they could sense my presence. I tightened my grip on the pipe, muscles tensed for action. The creatures drew closer, their mouths opening to reveal rows of gleaming teeth. In that moment, facing this unknown threat, I found myself wishing for the familiar danger of the wasteland above. One of the creatures lunged at me, its mouth gaping wide. I swung the pipe, feeling it connect with a satisfying thud. The creature flew back, its chittering turning into a high-pitched shriek of pain, but its cries seemed to incite the others. They surged forward as one, a wave of scales and teeth. I fought with everything I had, the pipe becoming an extension of my arm as I swung it in wide arcs. The sound of metal striking flesh filled the air, mixing with the creature's shrieks and my own grunts of exertion. But for everyone I knocked back, two more seemed to take its place. Pain flared across my leg as teeth sank into my calf. I cried out, stumbling backwards. My back hit the slimy wall of the tunnel, leaving me nowhere to retreat. The creatures pressed in, their eyeless faces somehow radiating hunger and malice. As I prepared for what might be my final stand, a new sound cut through the chaos, a low, resonant hum that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The creatures froze, their chittering dying away to nothing. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, they scuttled back into the darkness, leaving me alone and bewildered. The sudden silence was almost as unnerving as the attack had been. I stood there, back pressed against the slimy wall, my makeshift weapon still raised. The strange hum that had dispersed the creatures lingered in the air, vibrating through my bones. Pain throbbed in my calf where one of the eyeless things had bitten me. I slid down the wall, my legs no longer able to support me. The pipe clattered to the ground beside me as I examined my wound in the dim light. The creature's teeth had torn through my scavenged pants, leaving a series of deep punctures in my flesh. Blood oozed from the wounds, mixing with the slime on the tunnel floor. I tore a strip of fabric from my already tattered shirt, using it to bind the wound as best I could. The hum was changing, its pitch rising and falling in an almost rhythmic pattern. It reminded me of Mother's strange, melodious breathing, but distorted and amplified. As I listened, I realized it wasn't coming from all around me as I'd first thought. It had a direction. Using the pipe as a makeshift crutch, I pulled myself to feet and limped forward. The tunnel stretched out before me, curving away into darkness, but now I could see a faint, otherworldly light in the distance, pulsing in time with the mysterious hum. As I rounded a bend in the tunnel, the source of the light came into view. My breath caught in my throat at the sight. A massive chamber opened up before me, its ceiling lost in shadows high above. But it was what occupied the center of the chamber that held my attention. A tree stood there, but like no tree I had ever seen before. Its trunk was a twisting mass of silvery bark that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Branches stretched out in all directions, each ending in clusters of leaves that glowed with a soft, ethereal radiance. The colors shifted constantly, from deep blues to vibrant purples and back again. At its base, roots spread out across the chamber floor, but these weren't ordinary roots. The roots pulsed with a strange energy, and wherever they touched the ground, delicate, luminescent flowers bloomed, appearing as if they were made of crystal. The hum emanated from this fantastical tree, each pulse sending waves of light rippling through its branches. As I watched, mesmerized, I noticed movement near the roots. The eyeless creatures from earlier were approaching, but their behavior had changed dramatically. They moved as if in a trance, their sightless heads swaying in sync with the tree's pulsing light. Upon reaching the roots, something extraordinary and terrifying occurred. The roots came alive, wrapping around the creatures and drawing them in. I stood in horror as the creatures' bodies began to wither, their life force seemingly drained by the tree. The process was swift and silent, leaving behind only dried husks that crumbled into dust. It was then that I noticed the bones. Scattered around the base of the tree were countless skeletal remains, some fresh, others ancient and bleached white. They belonged to the same species as the eyeless creatures, their empty sockets staring sightlessly at the mesmerizing tree that had lured them to their doom. Despite the grotesque scene before me, I couldn't help but be awed by the tree's terrible beauty. It was as if some ancient elfin magic had taken root in this post-apocalyptic underworld, twisted and changed to survive in this harsh new reality. As I stood there, transfixed by the otherworldly spectacle, a new sound reached my ears, voices, human voices, coming from somewhere beyond the tree. The words were too distant to discern, but the tone was urgent, excited. My heart raced. Other people, here in this underground realm? Were they trapped like me? Or did they know something about this place, about the strange tree that fed on life itself? I tightened my grip on the pipe, my only weapon and support. Whatever lay ahead, I had to investigate. The answers I sought about this place, about Mother, about myself, might be waiting for me beyond that glowing, life-draining tree. Chapter 3. The distant voices echoed through the vast underground chamber, drawing me forward with a mix of curiosity and trepidation. I crouched low, clutching the rusted pipe I had scavenged earlier, a crude weapon, but better than facing the unknown unarmed. The cold, rough surface bit into my palms, a reminder of the harsh reality I was about to confront. Moving cautiously from one pile of debris to another, I used the scattered remnants of collapsed walls and ceilings as cover. The air grew heavier as I approached the source of the voices, carrying a strange metallic scent that tickled my nostrils. It was unlike anything I had encountered before, even in the toxic wastelands above. The voices grew clearer, but their language remained unintelligible. It was unlike any I had heard in the markets or among the scattered communities of survivors. An odd, almost musical quality permeated their speech, reminiscent of the strange melodies Mother sometimes emitted in her sleep. Peering out from behind a large chunk of concrete, I finally caught sight of the speakers. My breath caught in my throat. A group of 10 figures sat in a rough circle, their appearance so startling that I briefly wondered if the toxic air had finally addled my brain. 5 of the group wore elaborate robes with intricate patterns woven into fabric that shimmered in the dim light. The other 5 stood at attention, their posture rigid and alert. These figures wore simpler garments, but each carried a wickedly sharp blade at their hip. Guards, I realized, though their weapons looked more ceremonial than practical. Their features captivated me. Golden brown skin glowed with an inner light, contrasting sharply with the dull, ashen complexions I was accustomed to seeing. Their large, luminous eyes, with oversized pupils, swept the area with an otherworldly grace. Most striking were their ears, delicately pointed at the tips, giving them an almost elven appearance. With a jolt, I realized what I was witnessing. These were the new people, the mysterious beings whispered about in the markets, beings who could survive in areas that would kill a normal human within days, beings that some claimed had strange abilities, powers beyond our comprehension. A figure lay in the center of the circle, tightly wrapped, only its head visible from my vantage point. Whether it was alive or dead, I couldn't tell. The body remained motionless, offering no indication of life. The chamber itself pulsed with an otherworldly energy. The walls glistened with a thin sheen of moisture, reflecting the soft glow emanating from the strange tree at the center. Shadows danced along the curved ceiling, cast by the flickering light of bioluminescent fungi clinging to the rocky outcrops. The air was thick with a mix of scents, the familiar musty odor of the underground, the sharp tang of the metallic smell I had noticed earlier, and something new, a sweet, almost floral fragrance wafted from the direction of the tree, subtle yet enticing. As I watched, transfixed, one of the robed figures leaned forward, their hand hovering over the wrapped body. Their lips moved, forming words I couldn't understand, but the cadence suggested some sort of ritual or prayer. The others in the circle bowed their heads, their expressions a mix of reverence and concern. The guards remained vigilant, their eyes constantly scanning the chamber. One of them turned in my direction, and I ducked back behind the concrete, my heart pounding. Had I been spotted? I held my breath, counting the seconds, but no alarm was raised. When I dared to look again, a new figure was descending from the glowing tree that dominated the chamber. This newcomer moved with a fluid grace that set them apart even from the other new people. In one hand, they carried a knife that gleamed with an unnatural light. In the other, they held what at first glance appeared to be a fruit, but unlike any I had ever seen. The fruit was roughly the size and shape of a pomegranate, but that was where the similarities ended. Its skin was a vibrant, almost neon purple that pulsed with its own inner light. As the robed figure approached the circle, the fruit seemed to throb in time with the strange, resonant hum that permeated the chamber. The tension in the air was palpable as the newcomer joined the circle. Whatever was about to happen, it was clear that it held great significance for these beings, and I, hidden in the shadows, was about to witness it all. The newcomer spoke, their voice rising and falling in a cadence that, while unintelligible to me, clearly held great importance for the assembled group. The guards straightened, their hands moving to the hilts of their blades. Those seated leaned forward, their large, luminous eyes fixed on the fruit. With a swift, practiced motion, The robed figure used the knife to slice open the purple fruit. The blade parted the skin with surprising ease, releasing a burst of luminescent juice that hung in the air for a moment before falling. A wave of scent washed over me, sweet and complex, with notes I couldn't begin to identify. It reminded me of Mother's alien fragrance, but more intense, almost intoxicating. The figure moved to the wrapped body in the center of the circle. With gentle movements, they tilted the head back. The dim light caught the wrapped figure's face, revealing golden skin stretched tight over sharp cheekbones. Its eyes were closed, lips parted slightly. Carefully, the robed figure allowed the glowing juice to drip into the partially opened mouth. This process was repeated several times, each application followed by a careful massaging of the throat to encourage swallowing. The other new people watched intently, their expressions a mix of hope and apprehension. For a long, tense moment, nothing happened. The chamber fell silent, save for the ever-present hum of the tree. Then suddenly a violent coughing broke the silence. The body convulsed, struggling against its bindings. The sound echoed off the chamber walls, startlingly loud after the previous quiet. In an instant, the circle erupted into action. Hands moved swiftly to cut away the wrappings, freeing the golden-skinned figure within. As the bindings fell away, I could see that the figure was male, his body emaciated and covered in strange, glowing markings. The robed figure who had administered the fruit now cradled the gasping individual, urging him to consume more. At first, the sickly person resisted, turning his head away. But then, as if suddenly gripped by an insatiable hunger, he began to devour the fruit with alarming speed. Juice ran down his chin, staining his golden skin with streaks of glowing purple. As he ate, a change came over him. The glowing markings on his skin began to fade, and his sunken cheeks filled out. It was as if I was watching months of healing happen in mere moments. The other new people murmured among themselves, their musical language taking on a tone of excitement. One of the guards stepped forward, kneeling beside the revived figure. He spoke softly, his words unintelligible to me, but clearly comforting to the other. As I watched this bizarre scene unfold, my mind raced with questions. What was this fruit? How could it heal so quickly? And if it could do this for one of the new people, what might it do for Mother? The revived figure was now sitting up on his own, looking around with wide, confused eyes. He spoke, his voice raspy, but growing stronger with each word. The others responded, their tones soothing and reassuring. The new people helped him to his feet, supporting him as he took his first shaky steps. His movements became more sure with each passing moment, the fruit's effects seemingly still at work. As they began to move toward a tunnel on the far side of the chamber, I pressed myself further into the shadows. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of fear at nearly being discovered and excitement at what I had witnessed. Once I was certain they were gone, I emerged from my hiding place. The chamber felt different now, emptier, yet somehow more alive. The glowing tree pulsed with an inner light, its roots writhing slowly across the ground. I gave them a wide berth, remembering the piles of bones I'd seen earlier. My attention was drawn to the discarded remnants of the fruit used in the ritual. Fragments of the vibrant purple skin lay scattered on the ground, still faintly glowing. An idea began to form in my mind, equal parts thrilling and terrifying. I crouched down, picking up a piece of the discarded fruit skin and bringing it to my nose. The scent was even more intoxicating up close, sweet and complex, with an underlying note that reminded me of Mother's alien fragrance. My fingers tingled where they touched the glowing fragment. Without fully considering the consequences, I slipped the fruit fragments into the small satchel I carried for scavenging. The weight of them against my hip felt significant, as if I was carrying something far more valuable than mere scraps. My eyes were drawn back to the tree. Now that I was closer, I could see that what I had initially taken for knots in the trunk were actually crude pegs, driven deep into the wood to form a makeshift ladder. The pegs were made of a material I couldn't identify. Not quite metal, not quite wood, with a faint luminescence of their own. Following the twisting branches upward, I spotted clusters of the glowing purple fruits nestled among the luminescent leaves. They pulsed with an inner light, almost as if they had a heartbeat of their own. The longer I stared, the more they seemed to call to me. A plan began to form in my mind, both thrilling and terrifying. If this fruit could heal, or at least help, a sick humanoid like the new people, could it do the same for Mother? The rational part of my brain screamed that this was foolish, dangerous, but the part of me that had watched Mother grow weaker day by day, that had felt the crushing weight of helplessness, silenced those doubts. I approached the base of the tree cautiously, wary of the writhing roots. Up close, the bark was unlike anything I'd seen before. It shimmered with an iridescent quality, patterns swirling across its surface like oil on water. The air around the tree felt charged, almost electric. Placing my hand on the first peg, I was surprised by its warmth. It felt alive under my touch, pulsing gently in time with the tree's inner light. For a moment I hesitated. Was I really going to climb this alien tree, steal its fruit, all on the slim hope that it might help Mother? The image of Mother's pale, weakening form flashed through my mind, her iridescent eyes growing dimmer each day, the labored sound of her breathing. I gritted my teeth and began to climb. Each movement upward brought me closer to the clusters of glowing fruit, their pulsing light growing more hypnotic the nearer I got. The pegs were surprisingly sturdy under my weight, though they seemed to shift slightly with each grip, as if adjusting to my touch. The air thickened as I ascended, charged with an energy I couldn't quite explain. It reminded me of the feeling in the air just before a radiation storm, but instead of dread, it filled me with an odd sense of anticipation. My skin tingled, the hairs on my arms standing on end. Halfway up, I paused to catch my breath. Looking down, I was struck by how far I'd climbed. The chamber floor seemed distant, the shadows deeper from this vantage point. The hum of the tree was louder here, reverberating through my body. A soft rustling above me caught my attention. One of the fruit-laden branches had lowered itself, as if offering its bounty. The fruits seemed even more vibrant up close, their purple skin almost translucent, revealing the glowing seeds within. With trembling hands, I reached for the nearest fruit. My fingers brushed its surface and a jolt of energy raced up my arm. For a split second, I felt connected to something vast and ancient, a consciousness far beyond my understanding. Then the sensation faded, leaving me dizzy and breathless. Shaking off the strange feeling, I plucked the fruit from its stem. For a moment, I feared some kind of retaliation from the tree, but nothing happened. Emboldened, I reached for another and another. Each fruit I harvested went into my satchel, the bag growing heavier with each addition. As I worked, I lost track of time. The rhythmic process of reach, pluck, store became almost meditative. It wasn't until my satchel was straining at the seams that I realized I had collected 7 of the strange fruits. The weight of them was reassuring, a promise of hope for Mother. Satisfied with my haul, I began the descent, my heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and fear. What I was doing was theft, plain and simple. If caught, I doubted the new people would show mercy, no matter how desperate my reasons. But for Mother, I was willing to take the risk. My feet touched the ground, and the full weight of what I'd done hit me. The satchel at my hip felt impossibly heavy, laden with stolen treasures from an otherworldly tree. The chamber seemed different now, the shadows deeper, the tree's pulsing light more ominous than mesmerizing. Relief at being back on solid ground was short-lived. As I stepped away from the tree, my foot caught on one of its writhing roots. Pain shot through my leg as the root's sharp edge sliced into my flesh. I stumbled backward, warm blood seeping from the wound and staining my tattered pants. To my horror, the root I had stepped on began to move with more purpose, reaching towards the drops of blood I had spilled. The movement was deliberate, almost hungry. I scrambled away, my injured leg protesting with each movement. The root stretched, quivering, as if trying to extend its reach. Finally, I reached a pile of debris far enough from the tree's grasping roots to feel safe. Leaning against a chunk of broken concrete, I examined my wound. The cut was deep, running from my ankle halfway up my calf. Blood oozed steadily, mixing with the ever-present grime of the underground. I tore strips from my already tattered shirt, wincing as I bound the wound tightly. The makeshift bandage quickly turned dark with blood, but it would have to do. As I worked, I kept a wary eye on the tree. Its roots had settled back into their previous slow writhing, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they, and the tree itself, were somehow aware of my presence. The scent of the fruits in my satchel filled the air around me, sweet and alien. My stomach growled, a sharp reminder that I couldn't remember the last time I'd eaten. The fruit's allure was strong, promising not just sustenance but something more. A realization dawned on me, cutting through the haze of pain and hunger. If I intended to give this fruit to Mother, I needed to know if it was safe. The new people had used it in their ritual, true, but they were different, evolved or changed in ways I didn't understand. What if the fruit that healed them was poison to someone like Mother or me? There was only one way to find out. With a mix of trepidation and curiosity, I reached into my satchel and withdrew one of the glowing fruits. It felt warm in my hand, almost alive. Up close, I could see that its skin was covered in tiny, intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change as I watched. They reminded me of the strange symbols Mother sometimes traced in the air when she thought I wasn't looking. My mouth watered as I began to peel it open, the scent growing stronger with each layer I removed. Inside, the fruit was filled with translucent purple seeds suspended in a glowing liquid. It was both familiar and utterly alien, like a pomegranate from some strange, otherworldly garden. For a moment, I hesitated. Was I really going to eat something I had just stolen from a group of mysterious beings in an underground cavern? Every survival instinct I had developed in the harsh world above screamed that this was a bad idea. But the gnawing hunger in my stomach and the memory of Mother's weakening condition steeled my resolve. If there was even a chance this fruit could help her, I had to know. And the only way to know was to try it myself. I raised the fruit to my lips, its glow illuminating my dirty, scarred hands. The sweet scent was overwhelming now, making my head spin. With a deep breath, I took my first bite. The taste was indescribable, sweet and tart and somehow electric. It was as if I could feel each individual taste bud coming alive. The juice ran down my chin as I devoured the fruit, unable to stop myself once I had started. Each bite sent a jolt through my body, a burst of energy unlike anything I had ever experienced. At first, I felt nothing beyond the satisfaction of a meal, but then, gradually, a warmth began to spread through my body. It started in my core and radiated outward, focusing particularly on the areas where I had been injured. The sensation grew, becoming almost unbearable around my wounded leg. I watched in amazement as the gash on my leg began to close before my eyes. The bleeding stopped, and a scab formed with unnatural speed. The pain receded, replaced by a tingling sensation that was not entirely unpleasant. Even the older scars on my hands seemed to fade slightly, the skin smoothing out. Experimentally, I stretched my leg. While not completely healed, the improvement was remarkable. The wounds on my back, too, felt less painful, the skin less tight and inflamed. I took a deep breath, noticing that the stuffy feeling in my chest, a constant companion in the toxic world above, had eased. My senses seemed sharper. The dim light of the cavern was suddenly clearer, revealing details I hadn't noticed before. Faint bioluminescent patterns on the walls, the subtle movements of air currents carrying unfamiliar scents. I could hear the distant drip of water echoing through the tunnels, and underneath it all, a low hum that seemed to resonate with something inside me. Excitement coursed through me, tempered by a newfound clarity of thought. This was exactly what I had hoped for, exactly what Mother needed. With 6 fruits left in my satchel, I allowed myself to imagine a future where Mother was healthy again, where we could leave this dangerous place and find somewhere safe. But as the initial euphoria of my discovery faded, reality began to set in. I was still deep underground, in unknown territory. The new people could return at any moment. I needed to find my way back to the surface, back to Mother, before my absence was noticed or the fruit's effects wore off. With renewed determination, I gathered my belongings and the precious fruits. As I made my way back toward the tunnel I had entered through, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The shadows seemed to move at the corners of my vision, and the ever-present hum of the cavern had taken on a more ominous tone. I quickened my pace, my partially healed leg protesting but holding. The tunnel entrance loomed ahead, a dark maw leading back to the world I knew. Just as I reached it, a sound behind me made me freeze. It was faint, barely perceptible, the soft scrape of something moving across stone. Slowly I turned. The chamber appeared empty, the tree pulsing gently in the center. But there, in the shadows near its base, I caught a flicker of movement. A root, thicker than the others, was extending toward me. As I watched, frozen in place, it seemed to sniff the air, searching. My heart pounded in my chest. Had the tree sensed the fruit I'd eaten? Was it aware of the others in my satchel? I took a step back, then another, moving as quietly as I could toward the tunnel entrance. The root paused in its advance, swaying slightly as if uncertain. Then, with a speed I wouldn't have thought possible, it surged forward. I turned and ran, plunging into the darkness of the tunnel. Behind me, I heard a sound like wood scraping against stone, the tree's roots pursuing me. Adrenaline and the lingering effects of the fruit lent me speed. I raced through the twisting passages, relying more on instinct than sight to guide me. The sounds of pursuit faded, but I didn't slow down. Whatever consequences my actions might bring, they were a problem for later. Right now, all that mattered was getting back to Mother with my miraculous find. As I ran, dodging obstacles and leaping over small chasms, a part of me wondered if I would ever see that otherworldly chamber again, or if I would want to. The image of the grasping root was seared into my mind, a reminder of the dangers that lurked in this strange underground world. Finally, I saw a faint light ahead, the manhole cover I had entered through, what felt like a lifetime ago. With a final burst of speed, I reached it, my fingers scrabbling at the heavy metal. As I pushed it aside and emerged into the toxic twilight of the surface world, I allowed myself a moment of relief. I had made it. I was alive, and in my satchel I carried hope for Mother's salvation. Chapter 4. One day later, the ruins of the old city receded behind me as I traversed the wasteland, my heart still racing from the events in the underground chamber. The weight of the stolen fruits against my hip was a constant reminder of the risks I had taken. Yet the toxic air that usually burned my lungs seemed less oppressive, perhaps a lingering effect of the fruit I had consumed. Jagged metal and crumbling concrete littered my path. Every step demanded caution to avoid twisting an ankle or slicing open my boots on the sharp debris. The sun, a sickly orb barely visible through the perpetual haze, cast long, distorted shadows across the desolate landscape. The events of the past hours replayed in my mind, a loop of fragmented memories. The new people with their golden skin and luminous eyes, the glowing tree laden with pulsing fruit, and the miraculous healing I had experienced all felt like a fever dream. Yet the tingling sensation in my newly healed wounds and the unfamiliar energy coursing through my veins were undeniable proof that it had all been real. A movement in my peripheral vision caught my attention. A pack of mutated creatures huddled over a carcass about 50 yards to my left. They might have once been dogs, but radiation and time had twisted them into grotesque forms. Multiple eyes swiveled in my direction, assessing me as a potential threat.
Lucky for both of us,
I muttered, giving them a wide berth. Their matted fur was patchy, revealing skin covered in oozing sores. Elongated snouts filled with needle-sharp teeth snapped and snarled as they fought over their meal. The stench of decay and unwashed animal reached me even from this distance, mixing with the ever-present metallic tang in the air. Cresting a small hill, I paused to catch my breath. The familiar sight of the trash heap sprawled out before me, a grotesque monument to a civilization long gone, brought a sense of relief. Massive piles of discarded remnants from the old world stretched as far as the eye could see, forming an ever-shifting labyrinth of twisted metal, shattered plastics, and unidentifiable masses of decaying matter. Despite their ugliness, the sight filled me with relief. I was close to home, close to Mother. The maze of makeshift dwellings constructed from the detritus of the old world began to take shape as I drew nearer. Plumes of acrid smoke rose from scattered fires where other scavengers cooked their meager meals or burned trash for warmth. The air grew thicker, a pungent mixture of chemical fumes, rotting garbage, and the unmistakable odor of unwashed bodies. Skeletal figures moved between the dwellings, their eyes hollow and wary. Some nodded in recognition as I passed, while others clutched their meager possessions closer, eyeing my satchel with poorly disguised interest. Finally, I stood before our shelter, a patchwork structure of corrugated metal, synthetic fabrics, and scavenged materials that somehow managed to stand against the harsh elements. The faded blue tarp that served as our roof fluttered weakly in the toxic breeze. A strand of rusted cans hung by the entrance, our makeshift alarm system.
Home sweet home,
I whispered, a mixture of irony and genuine affection in my voice. Taking a deep breath, I pushed aside the heavy material that served as our door. The familiar musty scent of our living space washed over me, mingled with the herbal aroma of medicinal concoctions. My eyes struggled to adjust to the dim interior, the only light filtering through small gaps in the walls. As my vision cleared, I saw Mother rise swiftly from her resting place, Her movements were fluid, almost predatory, despite her weakened state. The kitchen knife clutched in her hand glinted dully in the low light. Her iridescent eyes, unnaturally large and luminous, fixed on me with an intensity that never failed to unsettle me.
Mother, it's me,
I said quickly, raising my hands to show I was unarmed. Recognition flashed in Mother's eyes, and the tension in her posture eased slightly. The knife lowered, but she didn't release her grip. Her skin, usually pale with a faint luminescence, looked ashen in the dim light of our shelter.
Darius offspring,
She said, her voice a mixture of relief and concern.
Your return was significantly delayed. Explain.
I set my satchel down carefully, acutely aware of its precious contents. The fruits inside seemed to pulse with a faint energy, detectable even through the thick fabric. The air in our small shelter felt charged, as if the fruit's presence had altered the very atmosphere.
I apologize for worrying you, Mother,
I replied, choosing my words carefully.
My scavenging took me further than intended.
Mother's eyes narrowed, her gaze piercing. The iridescent quality of her irises seemed more pronounced, swirling with colors I had no names for. She took a step closer, her movements graceful despite her illness.
Elaborate on your activities,
She demanded, her tone leaving no room for evasion. Taking a deep breath, I began to recount my journey into the old city ruins. The acrid smell of the wasteland clung to my clothes, mixing with the familiar sense of our home. As I spoke, I carefully omitted the details about the new people, focusing instead on the discovery of the underground chamber and the strange, glowing tree. Mother moved closer, her eyes roving over me with an intensity that made me squirm. Her slender fingers, cool to the touch, probed the newly healed wounds on my hands and arms. The contrast between her cool skin and the lingering warmth from the fruit's effects was startling.
These injuries,
She said, her tone sharp.
Recent acquisition, yet advanced healing evident. Explain.
I swallowed hard, knowing I couldn't hide the truth from her keen senses. The taste of the fruit lingered on my tongue, a reminder of the risk I had taken.
The fruit, Mother,
I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper.
It has properties, healing properties. I consumed one to ensure its safety before bringing it to you.
Mother's eyes widened, a rare display of surprise on her usually composed face. The subtle shimmer beneath her skin intensified momentarily, a physical manifestation of her emotional state.
Consumption of unknown substances is extremely high risk, she stated, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. Your actions were reckless.
I know,
I said, dropping my gaze to the dirt floor of our shelter. The weight of my decision pressed down on me, but I couldn't bring myself to regret it.
But Mother, you're getting worse. The medicines we've been using aren't working. I had to try something.
A tense silence filled the small space of our shelter. I could feel Mother's gaze on me, assessing, calculating. The only sound was the faint rustle of the tarp roof in the toxic wind outside. Finally, she spoke.
Show me this fruit.
With trembling hands, I reached into my satchel and withdrew one of the glowing purple fruits. Its soft light illuminated Mother's face, casting strange shadows that emphasized her elven-like features. The sharp angles of her cheekbones seemed more pronounced in this otherworldly glow. Mother took the fruit delicately, turning it over in her hands. Her long, slender fingers traced the intricate patterns on its skin. She brought it to her nose, inhaling deeply. Her eyes closed for a moment, and a look of concentration passed over her face.
The scent is familiar,
She murmured, almost to herself.
reminiscent of...
She trailed off, her eyes distant, as if lost in a memory. Then, with a slight shake of her head, she refocused on me. The fruit's glow reflected in her eyes, creating an unsettling effect.
Your assessment of its healing properties appears accurate,
She stated, her tone clinical, but with an undercurrent of something I couldn't quite identify.
We will proceed with caution.
Mother's decision to try the fruit filled me with a mixture of hope and anxiety. I watched intently as she used the kitchen knife to carefully slice open the purple skin. The blade, worn from years of use, parted the fruit's flesh with surprising ease. The fruit's inner glow intensified as it was exposed to the air, casting a surreal light throughout our dim shelter.
Mother,
I said, my voice tight with concern.
Perhaps I should prepare it for you.
She shook her head, her silver hair catching the fruit's light in an otherworldly shimmer.
Negative. Direct interaction necessary for full assessment.
I nodded, knowing better than to argue. Instead, I busied myself preparing one of our few clay cups, positioning it to catch the fruit's glowing juice as Mother expertly manipulated the knife. The cup, chipped and stained from years of use, seemed an incongruously mundane vessel for such a miraculous substance. The sweet alien scent of the fruit filled our small space, more intense than I remembered from the underground chamber. It mingled with the usual odors of our shelter, the musty smell of our bedding, the sharp tang of Mother's medicinal herbs, and the ever-present metallic scent of the wasteland that seeped through our walls. Mother's nostrils flared slightly, her eyes narrowing in concentration. The subtle glow beneath her skin seemed to pulse in response to the fruit's presence.
Composition complex,
She murmured, her voice barely audible.
Detecting elements similar to, but altered. Intriguing.
Once the cup was full of the luminescent liquid, Mother raised it to her lips. She paused, her iridescent eyes meeting mine. In that moment, I saw a flicker of something I rarely witnessed in her: uncertainty.
Darius offspring, your concern is noted.
She said, her tone softening slightly.
However, this action is necessary. Observe carefully. Report any anomalies.
With that, she tilted the cup back and drank deeply. The glowing liquid disappeared down her throat, leaving a faint luminous trail on her lips. For a long moment, nothing seemed to happen. Mother stood perfectly still, her eyes closed, as if listening to something I couldn't hear. The silence in our shelter was absolute, broken only by the faint rustle of the wind outside. Then, gradually, I noticed a change. The sickly pallor that had haunted her skin for so long began to fade, replaced by a subtle, healthy glow. The hollows in her cheeks filled out slightly, and the dark circles under her eyes lightened. Mother's eyes snapped open, glowing more brightly than I had seen in years. The colors in her irises swirled and shifted like oil on water.
Fascinating.
She breathed, her voice stronger than it had been in months.
The cellular response is unexpected. Accelerated healing detected. Also something more. Something familiar.
Encouraged by these positive signs, I quickly moved to prepare the rest of the fruit. Using our crude utensils, I mashed the remaining pulp into a fine paste, remembering how the new people had administered it to their sick companion.
Mother,
I said, offering her the bowl of mashed fruit.
I think you should eat this too. It might help even more.
She nodded, accepting the bowl. This time, she didn't hesitate, consuming the paste with an eagerness that surprised me. As she ate, I could almost see the vitality returning to her body. The subtle shimmer beneath her skin intensified, becoming more pronounced than I had seen in years. When she finished, Mother looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, a mixture of wonder and something that might have been fear. Her face, usually composed and inscrutable, was alive with emotion.
The effects are significant,
she said softly, her voice trembling slightly.
I remember.
She trailed off, her gaze turning inward. I waited, hardly daring to breathe, hoping she might finally share some of the secrets of her past. But the moment passed, and she refocused on me, her expression once again controlled.
You were correct, Darius offspring,
she said, her voice stronger than it had been in months.
This fruit possesses remarkable properties. We must use it judiciously.
The next morning I woke early, my mind already racing with plans. Pale, toxic light filtered through the gaps in our shelter's walls, casting sickly patterns on the dirt floor. Mother was still sleeping, her breathing easier than it had been in months. The subtle glow beneath her skin seemed more pronounced, a reassuring sign of the fruit's ongoing effects. Carefully, so as not to wake her, I prepared for my trip to the market. From the bottom of my satchel, I retrieved the discarded scraps of fruit skin from the new people's ritual. These fragments still pulsed with a faint luminescence, their sweet alien scent barely detectable. I reasoned these would be enough to gauge interest without risking our entire supply.
I'm heading to the market,
I whispered to Mother, knowing her keen senses would pick up my words even in sleep.
I won't be long.
The market was already bustling when I arrived, a chaotic assemblage of makeshift stalls and desperate traders. The air was thick with the mingled scents of unwashed bodies, questionable food items, and the ever-present chemical tang of the wasteland. Shouts and haggling voices created a cacophony that assaulted my ears after the relative quiet of our shelter. I made my way to a familiar stall, one I'd often visited for medicines in the past. The vendor, an older man named Grim, eyed me curiously as I approached. His face, mapped by the harsh realities of our world, was a patchwork of scars and radiation burns. One milky eye stared sightlessly, while the other fixed on me with sharp interest.
Well, if it ain't young Darius,
he said, his voice gruff but not unkind.
What brings you here so early?
I pulled out the wrapped fruit scraps, trying to keep my movements casual. The market was no place to show weakness or excitement.
I found something interesting. Thought you might want to take a look.
Grim's good eye widened as I revealed the glowing purple fragments. He leaned in close, his gnarled hands hovering over the scraps as if afraid to touch them. The scent of cheap alcohol and stale sweat rolled off him in waves.
By the wastelands,
he breathed, his voice barely audible over the market's din. Is this what I think it is? I shrugged, feigning ignorance.
I'm not sure. What do you think it is?
Grim glanced around furtively before lowering his voice further. His breath was hot against my ear as he spoke.
This looks like radiant fruit, stuff that grows in the most radioactive hot zones. Impossible to get unless you've got a death wish or a top-of-the-line radiation suit.
My heart raced at this information, blood pounding in my ears. So the underground chamber must have been highly radioactive. How had I survived unprotected? I pushed the thought aside, focusing on the matter at hand.
Is it valuable?
I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Grim nodded slowly, his good eye never leaving the glowing fragments.
Oh yes, very valuable and very rare. I'll give you 100 credits for these scraps.
I struggled to keep my face neutral, even as my mind reeled at the amount. It was more than I typically made in half a year of scavenging. The credits could buy medicine, food, maybe even passage to a safer settlement.
Deal,
I said quickly, before he could reconsider. As we made the exchange, Grim fixed me with a penetrating stare. His good eyes seemed to bore into me, searching for answers.
Where did you find this boy?
I swallowed hard, sticking to the story I'd prepared. The lie felt thick on my tongue.
In one of the trash heaps. Must have been discarded by someone from inside the city walls.
Grim nodded, though I could see skepticism in his eye.
Well, you're one lucky scavenger. If you find anything like this again, you come straight to me. Understand? I'll always give you the best price.
I nodded, already backing away from the stall. The weight of the credits in my pocket felt both comforting and dangerous.
Of course, thank you.
As I made my way home, my mind buzzed with the implications of what I'd learned. The fruit was clearly more valuable than I'd imagined. But with that value came risk. If others learned of our supply, I shook off the thought as I approached our shelter. For now, we had resources we'd never dreamed of. It was a start, a chance for something better. Yet as I pushed aside the fabric door, a nagging sense of unease settled in my stomach. In the wasteland, nothing came without a price. The rest of the day passed in a blur of routine scavenging and quiet moments with Mother. Her improved condition filled me with cautious optimism. The sickly pallor of her skin had given way to a healthier glow, and her movements were more fluid, less pained. As evening approached, I decided to make one last scavenging run before dark.
I won't go far,
I assured Mother as I prepared to leave. The familiar weight of my scavenging bag settled on my shoulder, the tools inside clinking softly.
And I won't go near the old city.
She fixed me with her penetrating gaze, a hint of worry in her iridescent eyes. The colors swirled more vibrantly than they had in years, a testament to the fruit's effects.
Exercise extreme caution, Darius offspring. Recent events may have drawn unwanted attention.
I nodded, touched by her concern.
I will, Mother. I'll be back soon.
The scavenging proved mostly fruitless. I found a few small items that might fetch a credit or two, but nothing significant. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in sickly hues of orange and green, I turned back towards home. The toxic wind picked up, carrying the acrid scent of decay and chemicals. The first sign that something was wrong was the door. Our makeshift entrance, usually secured with care, hung askew, nearly torn from its hinges. Dark stains that could only be blood marred the threshold, still wet and glistening in the fading light. My heart leapt into my throat, beating a frantic rhythm against my ribs.
No,
I whispered, breaking into a run.
No, no, no.
I burst into our shelter, my eyes struggling to adjust to the dim interior. The familiar sense of home were overwhelmed by the metallic tang of blood and something else. The sharp, ozone smell of energy weapons.
Mother!
I called out, my voice cracking with fear.
Mother, where are you?
Silence answered me. As my vision cleared, the scene before me came into horrifying focus. Blood spattered the floor and walls, dark and viscous in the low light. Our few possessions lay scattered and broken, shards of clay and twisted metal crunching under my feet. And there, in the center of it all, lay Mother. I stumbled towards her, my legs suddenly weak. She was sprawled on her back, one hand still clutching the kitchen knife we had used to prepare the fruit. Her chest. I choked back a sob as I saw the blackened, charred hole where a laser blast had struck her. The smell of burned flesh filled my nostrils, making me gag.
Mother,
I whispered, falling to my knees beside her. Her eyes, those beautiful alien eyes that had always watched over me, stared lifelessly at the ceiling. The vibrant, swirling colors that had danced within them were now dull and fixed, a stark contrast to the life they once held. With trembling hands, I reached out to close her eyes. Her skin, once warm to the touch and faintly glowing, was now cold and lifeless. The subtle shimmer that had always been a part of her was gone, leaving her looking hauntingly ordinary in death. I cradled Mother's body, my mind numb with disbelief and overwhelming grief. Questions churned in my thoughts, battling with the crushing sorrow that threatened to consume me. Who had done this? Why? Had it been because of the fruit, or was it something else entirely? As the initial shock began to ebb, a new emotion surged within me, anger. It burned hot and fierce, pushing aside the grief and replacing it with a need for answers, for justice. Someone had taken Mother from me, and I would find out who. They would pay for what they had done. With a heavy heart, I laid Mother's body down gently. There would be time to mourn her properly later, but for now, I needed to think clearly. Whoever had attacked our home might return, and I couldn't afford to be here when they did. I moved quickly, gathering what few supplies remained. The precious fruits I had brought back were gone, likely stolen by whoever had killed Mother. I stuffed the credits from the market and any small, valuable items I could find into my bag. As I prepared to leave, my eyes fell on Mother's knife, still clutched in her lifeless hand. Swallowing hard, I pried the knife from her fingers. The blade was slick with blood, evidence that she had fought back, that she hadn't gone down without a fight.
I'll make this right, Mother,
I whispered, my voice thick with emotion.
I promise.
With one last lingering look at the only home I had ever known and at the woman who had been my entire world, I slipped out into the gathering darkness of the wasteland. The toxic wind howled around me, carrying the stench of death and decay. But beneath it all, I caught a faint sweet scent, the lingering trace of the radiant fruit. As I disappeared into the night, I knew that whatever answers lay ahead, they were tied to that miraculous, dangerous discovery. And I would not rest until I had uncovered the truth and avenged the only family I had ever known. Chapter 5. The toxic night enveloped me as I fled from the ruins of my former home. Darkness cloaked the wasteland, broken only by the sickly glow of bioluminescent fungi clinging to piles of debris. My feet carried me through a labyrinth of trash heaps and decrepit structures, each step crunching on a layer of ash and broken glass. The weight of Mother's knife pressed against my hip, its blade still tacky with dried blood. Ahead lay my destination, a makeshift shelter hidden deep within a particularly treacherous area of the scrapyard. Constructed months ago, it was little more than a hollow carved out of a mountain of compacted trash. Scavenged metal sheets reinforced its walls, while layers of torn fabric and plastic provided camouflage against prying eyes. Approaching the hidden entrance, I paused, scanning the landscape. The toxic wind howled through the jagged terrain, carrying particles of dust that stung my eyes and throat. Its foul breath brought the ever-present stench of decay, mingled with a cocktail of chemicals I couldn't name. In the distance, the screech of mutated wildlife pierced the night, a reminder of the dangers lurking in the darkness. Satisfied that I was alone, I slipped into the cramped space. The familiar musty odor of my temporary shelter, a mix of rust, mold, and stale air, filled my nostrils. After the chaos of the past hours, it was almost comforting. My hands, scraped and dirty, fumbled in the darkness until they found the small battery-powered lantern I kept here. With a click, its weak light flickered to life, casting long shadows across the uneven walls. The adrenaline that had fueled my escape began to fade, leaving me hollow. Mother's absence pressed in on me, as tangible as the rough walls of the shelter. My legs gave way and I sank to the ground, my back scraping against the corrugated metal behind me. Tears streamed down my face, cutting clean trails through the grime and dust caked on my skin. The salt stung in small cuts I hadn't even noticed receiving. My chest heaved with silent sobs, each breath tasting of ash and despair. But grief was a luxury I couldn't afford, not if I wanted to survive and uncover the truth behind Mother's murder. Scrubbing my face with a grimy sleeve, I forced myself to think logically about the situation. The scene replayed in my mind, our home in disarray, Mother's body on the floor, the missing fruit. The attackers had come for our discovery, that much was clear. But who were they, and how had they known? My mind kept circling back to one person, the old shopkeeper in the market. His weathered face, mapped with a network of wrinkles and radiation scars, swam before my mind's eye. The milky blindness of one eye contrasted sharply with the keen, calculating gaze of the other. He was the only outsider who knew about the fruit. Could he have betrayed us? Or was he merely a pawn in a larger game? The shopkeeper was my only lead. With this thought firmly in mind, I began to plan my next move. The market would be my destination come dawn, but I would need to approach with caution. If the wrong people spotted me, I might end up sharing Mother's fate. Exhaustion finally overtook me. My muscles ached from the frantic flight, and my eyelids grew heavy. Curling up on the hard ground, I clutched Mother's knife tightly. Its presence was both a comfort and a grim reminder of all I had lost. As sleep claimed me, my last thoughts were of vengeance and the long road ahead. The sickly light of dawn filtered through the cracks in my shelter, painting everything in a jaundiced hue. My body protested as I stirred, muscles stiff from the night spent on the unforgiving ground. The events of the previous day crashed over me anew, but I pushed the grief aside. There was no time for self-pity. Every moment I delayed put me at greater risk of discovery. A meager breakfast of stale ration bars, another
luxury
I kept stashed in this shelter, did little to satisfy my hunger. The dry, flavorless squares stuck in my throat, but I forced them down. In the wasteland, energy was survival, and I couldn't afford to be picky. Preparation for my venture to the market began in earnest. I couldn't simply walk in as I normally would. If the attackers were still searching for me, I would need a disguise. Rummaging through the supplies stored here, my hands found an old scarf, its fabric rough and patched. It would serve to cover most of my face. Using some of my precious water, I scrubbed the worst of the grime from my skin. The cool liquid was a shock against my face, carrying away layers of ash and sweat. Then, with calculated precision, I rubbed ash and dirt strategically across my exposed skin, altering the appearance of what little would be visible. The harsh texture of the ash grated against my freshly cleaned skin, a constant irritant. As I worked, my mind wandered to the harsh realities of the world I inhabited. The air in the shelter grew thick with the weight of history, carrying the echoes of fear and desperation that had gripped humanity in the aftermath of the Great Catastrophe. Section Z City loomed in my mind's eye, its towering walls a stark divider between two vastly different worlds. The city had been built by the Alliance, a government formed by several global powers that began establishing surface communities once radiation levels had receded enough to allow sparse habitation. Many of the early settlers and builders were prisoners, sentenced to serve out their time through community service by constructing the foundations of this new world. In those early days, such a sentence was tantamount to a death warrant. The city's walls were a marvel of engineering, creating a magnetic protective dome-like structure that shielded its inhabitants from the deadly radiation outside. But for those early prisoners, ordinary men and women, who labored beyond this sanctuary, survival was a grim struggle. Many succumbed to mysterious cancers, tumors, and radiation sickness, their bodies unable to withstand the toxic environment. In recent times, iodine-based radiation medicines had improved significantly, allowing people to venture outside the walls with less immediate danger. Decontamination processes had also advanced, enabling the salvage and repurposing of old materials that could be sold within the city. However, these medicines remained prohibitively expensive for most. The average person outside the walls could rarely afford the recommended daily regimen, instead rationing their doses to weekly or even monthly intervals. This scarcity of protection was why so many in the outer settlements perished before reaching 30. Life found a way to persist, though. The poor and the desperate living in the slums and scavenging communities bred prolifically, with families often having 10 to 15 children in a lifetime. It was a brutal cycle. As older generations succumbed to the harsh environment, new little ones arrived to take their place, perpetuating the struggle for survival. Inside the walls, life was an entirely different matter, though I could only imagine it, having never set foot there myself. Those privileged few enjoyed all the modern conveniences this recovering world had to offer. The aristocratic class in particular had been genetically altered with DNA from the mysterious new people, granting them and their children significantly higher resilience to radiation. For the rest of us outside, we remained just human beings, struggling to survive in a world that had become cold, violent, and primordial. The unfairness of it all settled in my gut like a lead weight as I continued my work, the toxic wind howling beyond my shelter, a constant reminder of the poisons we battled daily and the vast divide between those who lived in safety and those of us fighting for every breath. My hands, working almost on autopilot, finished securing the scarf around my face. The rough fabric scratched at my skin, but it would help conceal my identity. Glancing at my reflection in a shard of broken mirror, I barely recognized myself. Good. Anonymity might just keep me alive. I needed weapons, supplies, and most crucially, information. The market would provide all three, but it would also be fraught with danger. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to put as much distance between myself and Section Z City as possible, but I couldn't, not without answers. Mother's face flashed in my mind, her iridescent eyes, the subtle glow of her skin, the grace of her movements, even in illness. The memory of her lying motionless on our shelter floor, life extinguished by a weapon I couldn't even comprehend, sent a surge of anger through me. It burned away the last vestiges of fear, leaving only determination in its wake. I gathered what few supplies I had, each item carefully chosen for maximum utility. The weight of Mother's knife at my hip was a constant reminder of my purpose. As I prepared to leave the relative safety of my hidden shelter, I paused. The musty air suddenly felt precious, a last moment of security before plunging into the unknown. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself for what lay ahead. The scent of rust and decay filled my lungs, grounding me in the harsh reality of my world. With a final check of my disguise, I pushed aside the camouflaged entrance and stepped out into the toxic wasteland. The sickly sun was climbing higher, its rays barely penetrating the perpetual haze that hung over the landscape. In the distance, the imposing silhouette of Section Z City's walls loomed. Somewhere within that maze of desperation and survival lay answers, and I was determined to find them, no matter the cost. The outskirts of Section Z City buzzed with frenetic energy as I approached. The market sprawled before me, a chaotic labyrinth of makeshift stalls and desperate traders. Ramshackle structures cobbled together from scavenged materials crowded every available space, creating narrow, twisting pathways between them. The air hung thick with a noxious cocktail of smells. Unwashed bodies pressed close in the confined spaces, their sour sweat mingling with the metallic tang of radiation that perpetually clung to everything. Questionable food items sizzled on improvised grills, the scent of charred meat warring with the underlying stench of rot. Above it all, the ever-present chemical tang of the wasteland permeated everything, a constant reminder of the world beyond. Pulling the scarf tighter around my face, I hunched my shoulders, altering my posture as I merged into the crowd. The rough fabric chafed against my skin, but I welcomed the discomfort. It kept me alert, focused on my surroundings. My eyes darted constantly, scanning faces and searching for any sign of recognition or threat. My first stop materialized through the haze, a weapons stall tucked between a scrap metal dealer and what appeared to be a purveyor of dubious pharmaceuticals. The vendor, a grizzled man with more scars than smooth skin, eyed me suspiciously as I approached. His face was a roadmap of violence, each scar telling a silent story of survival. "What'll it be?" he growled, his voice rough as gravel. With a gnarled hand, he gestured to the array of crude but effective weaponry laid out before him. Blades of various lengths caught what little light filtered through the market's patchwork canopy, their edges nicked but wickedly sharp. I pointed to a short blade just over 2 feet long. Its handle was wrapped in strips of leather, worn smooth by years of use. "How much?" The negotiation that followed was a dance as old as commerce itself. We haggled, each probing for weakness, neither willing to show too much interest. In the end, I secured the weapon for a price that wouldn't raise eyebrows. The familiar weight of a blade at my hip, in addition to Mother's knife, provided a small measure of comfort in this sea of potential threats. Next, I sought out a clothing merchant. My current attire, I knew, was too recognizable. More importantly, it was ill-suited for the journey I knew lay ahead. Navigating through the press of bodies, I found a stall displaying a variety of scavenged and repurposed garments. After careful consideration, I selected a dark brown outfit made from the treated hides of wasteland beasts. The leather was tough, offering some protection against both the elements and minor radiation exposure. Its dull color would help me blend into the landscape beyond the city's borders. A sturdy backpack, its straps reinforced with metal plates, steel-toe combat boots, and a basic med kit completed my purchases. Finding a secluded corner amidst the market's chaos, I changed into my new gear. The leather creaked slightly as I moved, still stiff and needing to be broken in. As I adjusted the straps of the backpack, a bitter laugh escaped my lips, muffled by the scarf. These were luxuries I could never have afforded before, yet I would trade them all in an instant to have Mother back. With my immediate needs addressed, I turned my attention to the real reason for my dangerous venture into the market, the old shopkeeper. His stall was just opening as I approached, keeping to the shadows and moving with calculated casualness. The rickety structure looked much as it had days ago, when I'd first brought him the fruit scraps, but now it felt ominous, a portal to answers I both craved and feared. I needed those answers, but I also needed to avoid drawing attention. This would require stealth and careful timing. Crouching behind a pile of discarded machine parts, I settled in to watch and wait for my opportunity. Time crawled by as I observed the old shopkeeper's stall. The man's movements were slow, deliberate, as he arranged his wares. His good eye darted nervously around the market, a constant state of alertness that spoke volumes about the dangers of life in the wasteland. When I saw him disappear into the back room, I knew my opportunity had arrived. Moving swiftly but quietly, I made my way to the rear of the structure. The scent of rust and decay grew stronger as I approached, mingling with an undercurrent of something chemical I couldn't quite identify. The door was locked, but that posed little challenge to someone who had spent their life scavenging. With a thin strip of metal I always carried for such purposes, I manipulated the simple mechanism. The lock clicked open with a sound that seemed deafening in the tense silence. Slipping inside, I concealed myself among the stored goods. The room was cluttered with crates and boxes, their contents a mystery. Dust motes danced in the dim light filtering through cracks in the walls. The air was stale, heavy with the musty odor of long-stored items. I didn't have to wait long. Within minutes, I heard the shuffle of feet and the sound of boxes being moved. Peering around a stack of crates, I saw the old man, his back to me as he arranged his stock. The shopkeeper's shoulders were hunched, his movements betraying a weariness that seemed bone-deep. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized this was my moment. Adrenaline surged through my veins, sharpening my senses. Moving with a quickness that surprised even me, I shut the door to the front of the shop and confronted the shopkeeper. His eyes widened in shock and fear as he recognized me, despite my disguise. The good eye darted frantically around the room, searching for an escape. The milky, sightless one seemed to stare right through me, adding to the unsettling nature of the confrontation. "Don't move," I growled, pressing my new blade against his throat. The metal gleamed dully in the low light, its edge hungry for answers.
"You're going to tell me everything you know about the people who came for the fruit."
The old man's face paled, the network of wrinkles deepening as fear etched itself into every line.
"Please,"
he whimpered, his voice trembling.
"I had no choice. They would have killed me."
The stench of fear rolled off him in waves, mingling with the musty air of the storeroom. His good eye was wide with terror, darting between my face and the blade at his throat.
"They killed my mother,"
I spat, pressing the blade harder. A thin line of red appeared on his weathered skin.
"Start talking."
His words tumbled out in a panicked rush, the story spilling from him like water from a broken dam. The fruit I had sold him had been tested and found to contain extraordinary levels of monoradiation. This discovery had attracted the attention of powerful people, elites from within the city walls. They had questioned him ruthlessly, and he had told them everything he knew.
"I'm sorry, lad,"
he said, his voice barely above a whisper.
I never meant for anyone to get hurt, but these people, they're not the sort you can say no to.
As the full implications of his words sank in, I felt a cold dread settling in my stomach. This was bigger than I had imagined. If the elites from inside the walls were involved, I was in far more danger than I had realized. I released the shopkeeper, my mind reeling with this new information. He slumped against a crate, his legs seemingly unable to support him. His good eye looked at me with a mixture of fear and pity.
If you value your life,
I warned him, my voice low and dangerous,
you'll forget you ever saw me.
With that, I slipped out of the storeroom and back into the bustling market. The cacophony of sounds and the press of bodies felt overwhelming after the tense quiet of the confrontation. My thoughts were in turmoil, but one thing was clear. I needed to leave, to get as far away from Section Z City as possible. But where could I go that the long reach of the elites couldn't find me? The vastness of the wasteland stretched out in my mind, full of unknown dangers, but also potential sanctuary. As I navigated through the market crowds, my mind raced with possibilities and plans. The knowledge gained from the shopkeeper weighed heavily on me as I navigated through the market's chaotic maze. Every face seemed a potential threat, every glance in my direction a possible recognition. The crowd's press and noise, once familiar, now felt suffocating. Keeping my head down and my movements purposeful, I made my way toward the market's outskirts. The stench of unwashed bodies and rotting food gave way to the acrid tang of the wasteland beyond. Reaching the periphery, I paused behind a pile of discarded machinery, its rust-eaten bulk providing momentary cover. The wasteland stretched out before me, a dangerous and unforgiving expanse. Twisted metal structures jutted from the ash-covered ground like the bones of long-dead beasts. The sky, a sickly yellow-green, promised another day of toxic rain. It was a harsh, deadly world, but it was my only option now. I couldn't risk staying near Section Z City, not with the elites on my trail. Before venturing into the unknown, one last task remained. Taking a circuitous route to avoid detection, I made my way back towards the area where our shelter had been. The need to see what had become of our home in the daylight gnawed at me, despite the risk. Approaching the familiar sector of the scrapyard, my heart sank. Even from a distance, the scene was wrong. A group of men surrounded the area where our shelter had stood, their presence jarringly out of place in this desolate landscape. Crouching behind a mound of twisted metal, I observed their movements. The acrid smell of burned plastic and electronics stung my nostrils. They had torched what remained of our home. These men were different from anything I'd seen before. Their uniforms, a dark material that seemed to absorb light, all had the Synopsis Industries logo on them and were pristine despite the wasteland's grime. Weapons of a quality I had never encountered before hung at their hips, sleek and undoubtedly lethal. They moved with a purpose and discipline that marked them as professionals, not the usual scavengers or gang members I was used to avoiding. Their faces were impassive, eyes hidden behind dark goggles that likely offered protection against more than just the harsh sunlight. The men seemed to be searching methodically through the debris, no doubt looking for any trace of the fruit or clues to my whereabouts. One of them held a device I didn't recognize, waving it slowly over the ground. It emitted a soft, pulsing tone that set my teeth on edge even at this distance. The sight filled me with a mixture of fear and anger. These were the people responsible for Mother's death, the ones who had shattered the only life I had ever known. My hand tightened on the hilt of my knife, knuckles white with the force of my grip. As much as part of me wanted to confront them, to demand answers or seek revenge, I knew it would be suicide. I was outnumbered and outgunned. Even with my new weapons, I stood no chance against their superior technology and training. With a heavy heart, I turned away from the scene. There was nothing left for me here now. My future, whatever it might hold, lay in the vast and deadly expanse of the wastelands. As I began my journey away from the only home I had ever known, questions tumbled through my mind. Who had Mother really been? Why were we so different from other humans? And how was all of this connected to the strange fruit we had discovered? I didn't have answers, but I vowed to find them. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of Section Z City and its elite, lay the truth about my origins and the key to understanding the power of the radiant fruit. With each step taking me further into the unknown, I silently renewed my promise to Mother. I would uncover the truth, no matter where it led me or what dangers I had to face. The wasteland stretched out before me, harsh and unforgiving, but it was a vastness filled with possibility, and somewhere within it, answers awaited. With one last look at the ruins of my past, I set out into the toxic wilderness, alone but determined. Chapter 6. The harsh sun beat down relentlessly, its rays slicing through the toxic haze that perpetually shrouded the wasteland. One day had passed since I fled the ruins of my former life, each step carrying me deeper into the desolate expanse of twisted metal and crumbling concrete. The landscape stretched endlessly in every direction, a wasteland painted in hues of rust and ash. My throat burned with each breath, the air thick with particulates and the acrid stench of decay. Sweat trickled down my back, soaking through the rough fabric of my scavenged clothing. The weight of my backpack, laden with meager supplies, pressed down on my shoulders, a constant reminder of my precarious situation. No clear plan guided my steps beyond the primal instinct to stay hidden. Mother's teachings echoed in my mind, a lifeline in this harsh new reality. Her voice, stern yet caring, seemed to whisper warnings with each gust of toxic wind.
Watch for signs of burrowing predators,
I muttered to myself, scanning the ground for telltale mounds or disturbed earth.
Avoid the shimmer of heat mirages, they often mask sinkholes.
The wasteland's silence was occasionally broken by distant howls, wild dogs, once man's companions, now warped by radiation into vicious hunters. Their cries sent involuntary shivers down my spine, my hand instinctively tightening around the hilt of my short sword. As the second day of wandering dawned, the monotony of destruction was broken by an unexpected sight. A mutated cactus rose from the barren earth, its yellowish-green form a beacon of hope amidst the desolation. These plants were renowned among wasteland travelers for their ability to filter even the most toxic rainwater into something drinkable. Approaching cautiously, I recalled Mother's warnings about its defense mechanisms. The cactus's thorns weren't just sharp, they carried a potent neurotoxin. Even a slight prick could cause excruciating pain and temporary blindness. The plant's skin glistened with an oily sheen, a visual reminder of its dangerous nature. With painstaking care, I used my short sword to cleave away the most dangerous clusters of spines. The blade's edge caught the sunlight as it sliced through the air, each cut precise and deliberate. Beads of toxic sap oozed from the wounds I inflicted on the plant, their pungent odor stinging my nostrils. Once I'd cleared a relatively safe area, I plunged my blade into the base of the cactus. The satisfying sound of splitting plant flesh was followed by a trickle, then a steady stream of clear, clean water. Quickly, I filled my canteen and other containers, the cool liquid a promise of survival in this unforgiving landscape. Using Mother's kitchen knife, now one of my most prized possessions, I carefully cut away sections of the cactus's flesh. The pale, fibrous pulp was edible and far more nutritious than most of the food available in the outer markets of Section Z City. As I worked, the knife's familiar weight in my hand brought a flood of memories. Mother using it to prepare our meager meals, teaching me the intricacies of wasteland survival. I wrapped the cactus pieces in clean cloth and stored them in my backpack, a welcome addition to my supplies. The scent of the freshly cut plant lingered on my hands, a strange mix of earthiness and something almost metallic, a reminder of how radiation had altered even the most basic forms of life. As I continued my journey, the cactus silhouette slowly disappeared behind me. Its discovery had been a small victory, but I knew better than to let my guard down. In the wasteland, moments of respite were fleeting, and danger lurked around every pile of rubble. The sun climbed higher, its heat intensifying. Mirages shimmered on the horizon, distorting the already alien landscape. I trudged on, each step a defiance against the hostile environment. The toxic sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in an eerie, multi-hued glow. Streaks of sickly green and unnatural purple stretched across the darkening expanse, a nightly reminder of our world's altered state. The temperature began to drop rapidly, the day's oppressive heat giving way to a bone-chilling cold. I knew it was time to find shelter. The wasteland's dangers multiplied after dark, with nocturnal predators emerging from their lairs to hunt. My eyes, strained from a day of constant vigilance, scanned the surroundings for a defensible position. An overturned transport vehicle caught my attention, its rusted bulk partially buried in a mound of rubble. The acrid smell of corroded metal and old oil filled my nostrils as I approached. Its massive frame would provide cover on 3 sides, leaving me only one direction to watch. Carefully, I inspected the wreck for signs of current inhabitants. My fingers traced the edges of claw marks scored into the metal, long dried bloodstains telling a silent story of some past violence. Satisfied it was empty, I set about creating a basic alarm system. Using scavenged string and some empty cans filled with pebbles, I created a perimeter that would rattle noisily if anything large tried to approach. The soft clink of metal on metal as I worked seemed unnaturally loud in the growing darkness. As I settled in for the night, my back pressed against the cool metal of the vehicle, the reality of my situation pressed down on me. The ache of Mother's loss, a constant companion, seemed to intensify with the falling darkness. I could almost hear her voice reminding me to stay alert, to trust no one but myself. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by the sounds of the wasteland night. The skittering of mutated insects echoed through the wreckage, their chitinous bodies scraping against metal and stone. Wind moaned through abandoned structures, a mournful sound that seemed to carry the ghosts of the old world. Once a blood-curdling shriek pierced the night, so close it jolted me fully awake. My hand gripped the hilt of my sword, knuckles white with tension as I strained to hear any approach. Whatever had made that sound seemed to move on, but sleep eluded me for hours afterward. On the second night, my precautions proved their worth. The clattering of my makeshift alarm yanked me from a restless slumber. In the dim starlight, I made out the form of a creature stalking toward me. Its movement was low and predatory, resembling a jackal, but twisted by radiation. Multiple eyes gleamed in the darkness, and patchy fur failed to cover skin mottled with cancerous growths. I scrambled to my feet, short sword in hand. The blade felt slick in my sweaty palm. "Back off!" I growled, trying to make myself appear larger. My voice sounded hoarse and foreign to my own ears, raw from disuse. The creature snarled in response, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. A wave of its fetid breath washed over me, carrying the stench of decay and sickness. It was clearly desperate, driven to take risks by hunger. For a moment, we stood locked in a standoff, neither willing to make the first move. Then it lunged, a blur of matted fur and gnashing teeth. I met its charge with a swipe of my blade, the metal singing through the air. A spray of hot blood hit my face as the sword opened a gash along the mutant's flank. The creature yelped in pain and surprise, clearly not used to prey that fought back so effectively. It circled me warily, leaving a trail of dark blood on the dusty ground. Its multiple eyes blinked independently, never all closing at once, always keeping me in sight. I could see the calculations running through its mutated brain, weighing the potential meal against the unexpected danger.
"Come on then,"
I taunted, my voice steadier than I felt. The surge of adrenaline sharpened my senses, making every detail of the confrontation stand out in stark relief.
"I'm not easy meat."
After a few more feints and swipes, the jackal seemed to decide I wasn't worth the effort. With a final snarl of frustration, it slunk back into the darkness, leaving me alone with the pounding of my heart and the stink of its blood on my blade. I remained on high alert for the rest of the night, muscles tense and ears straining for any sound of the creature's return. But no further threats materialized. As the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky, I allowed myself to relax slightly, exhausted but alive. The third day of my aimless wandering dawned with a sickly light filtering through the perpetual haze. As I rose from my makeshift shelter, muscles aching from nights spent on unyielding ground, a realization began to settle over me like the ever-present dust of the wasteland. I couldn't keep this up indefinitely. My supplies, while carefully rationed, felt lighter with each passing day. The water from the mutated cactus had been a godsend, but it wouldn't last forever. More pressingly, the gnawing emptiness in my gut reminded me that food was becoming scarce. Stepping out from the shadow of the overturned transport, I surveyed the desolate landscape. The horizon shimmered with heat mirages, distorting the already alien terrain. In the distance, the skeletal remains of once towering structures clawed at the sky, a grim reminder of the world that was lost. As I chewed on a strip of tough, radiation-preserved meat, my meager breakfast, a more visceral hunger gnawed at me, not for food, but for answers. I was no closer to uncovering the truth about Mother's past or the mysterious fruit that had brought such chaos into our lives. The memory of the fruit's sweet scent and miraculous effects lingered in my mind, as vivid as the day I first discovered it. Its glow seemed to taunt me from the recesses of my memory, holding secrets just beyond my grasp. I needed information, resources, and ultimately, a purpose beyond mere survival. As much as it pained me to admit it, that meant heading back toward civilization, or what passed for it in this broken world. My gaze drifted to the distant silhouette of crumbling skyscrapers that marked the old city, the place where I had discovered the underground chamber and the glowing tree. It called to me, a siren song of danger and potential revelation. Perhaps there, in the depths of those ruins, I might find answers to the questions that burned inside me. As I turned my steps back toward that ominous skyline, I began to formulate a plan. My previous venture had been reckless, fueled by desperation and naive hope. This time would be different. I couldn't risk drawing attention the way I had before.
One sale,
I muttered to myself as I walked, my voice rough from disuse.
Then move on. No settling, no trusting anyone.
The words felt harsh in my mouth, a far cry from the life Mother and I had built together. But that life was gone now, shattered by forces I still didn't fully understand. If I was going to survive long enough to uncover the truth, I needed to adapt, to become as hard and unyielding as the wasteland itself. As I drew closer to the outskirts of the old city, a familiar tingling sensation began to creep over my skin. It started as a subtle prickling, like static electricity, but grew more intense with each step. I had felt it before, on my first venture into these ruins, but had dismissed it in the excitement of my discovery. Now, with the knowledge gained from the market vendor, I understood its significance. This was a
red zone,
an area of intense radiation that should be lethal to any normal human. Yet here I was, walking through it with no more discomfort than a slight buzzing sensation across my skin. I paused, looking down at my hands. The skin there seemed to shimmer faintly, almost glowing in response to the invisible radiation saturating the air. It was yet another mystery to add to the growing list of questions about my own nature.
Why am I different?
I asked the empty air, not expecting an answer. The wind carried my words away, swallowing them in the vastness of the wasteland.
What did you hide from me, Mother?
Before venturing deeper into the city, I knew I needed to be better prepared. My short sword, while effective, limited me to close-quarters combat. If I encountered anything truly dangerous, and in this place that seemed inevitable, such a limitation could prove fatal. Scouting the perimeter of the ruins, I kept my eyes peeled for anything I could use to extend my reach. The ground was littered with debris, shards of concrete, twisted rebar, and the occasional glint of something more promising. Each step crunched under my boots, a mixture of gravel and pulverized glass that seemed to cover everything. After about an hour of careful searching, I came across a partially collapsed chain-link fence. Most of it had melted into useless slag, likely from the intense heat of whatever cataclysm had reshaped this world. But some of the support poles remained intact, jutting out of the ground like the ribs of some long-dead giant. I approached cautiously, wary of any sharp edges or hidden dangers. The metal was warm to the touch, still holding the day's heat. Rust flaked off under my fingers as I tested each pole for stability. Finally, I found one that seemed sturdy enough for my purposes. With a grunt of effort, I worked the pole free from the ground. It came loose with a screech of protesting metal that set my teeth on edge. I froze, scanning the area for any signs that the noise had attracted unwanted attention. But only the wind answered, whistling through the empty streets. The pole was about 7 feet long, an ideal length for a makeshift spear. Its weight felt reassuring in my hands, a promise of increased reach and defensive capability. But a blunt instrument alone wouldn't be enough. Using salvaged wire and the expertise gained from years of scavenging, I set about lashing Mother's kitchen knife to the end of the pole. The blade, while not designed for this purpose, was sharp and durable. It had served her well in life. Now it would serve me in my quest for answers. As I worked, memories of Mother flooded back. Her hands always steady, showing me how to tie knots that would hold under pressure. Her voice, patient but firm, explaining the importance of weapon maintenance. "A dull blade is more dangerous to you than your enemy," she'd often say. The process of creating the spear was meditative, allowing my mind to wander even as my hands stayed busy. I spent some time practicing with my new weapon, getting a feel for its reach and balance. The extra length would give me a significant advantage against most of the mutated wildlife I was likely to encounter. Sweat beaded on my brow as I moved through basic forms Mother had taught me, adapting them to the spear's longer reach. The weapon felt like an extension of myself, its movements fluid and natural.
This'll do.
I nodded, satisfied with my handiwork. The spear wasn't pretty, but it was functional. In the wasteland, that was all that mattered. With my new weapon in hand, I felt more confident about entering the depths of the old city. But as I stood on the threshold of the ruins, staring down debris-choked streets that had once bustled with life, a wave of emotions washed over me. This place, for all its dangers, was the last link I had to Mother and the life we'd shared. It was where everything had changed, where I'd found the fruit that had brought us hope and then tragedy. Coming back felt like tempting fate, but I knew I had no choice. The wind picked up, carrying the acrid scent of decay and something else, a faint, sweet aroma that I recognized instantly. It was the smell of the fruit, barely perceptible but unmistakable. My grip tightened on the spear, resolve hardening within me.
I'm going to find answers.
I promised the silent buildings around me, my voice barely above a whisper.
Whatever it takes.
Navigating the ruined city was a tense affair. Every step echoed off crumbling walls, the sound seeming to amplify in the eerie stillness. I moved from cover to cover, using abandoned vehicles and piles of rubble to conceal my presence. The spear in my hand was a constant comfort, its weight a reminder of my improved readiness. The air grew thicker as I ventured deeper into the city's heart. A fine, gritty dust coated everything, disturbed by my passage and swirling in eddies around my feet. It carried the metallic tang of radiation, mixed with the musty scent of decay. Each breath felt heavy, laden with particles I tried not to think about. Every sound set my nerves on edge, the skittering of mutant rats across broken concrete, the creak and groan of weakened structures settling. Once, a sudden crash in a nearby building sent me diving for cover, heart pounding. But it was just a section of flooring giving way, not the threat I'd feared. It took longer than expected to find the alley that led to the underground chamber. The city's layout, already confused by decades of decay, seemed to shift and change in my memory. More than once, I found myself in dead ends or unfamiliar streets, forcing me to backtrack and reorient myself. Frustration gnawed at me as I retraced my steps yet again.
Think,
I muttered to myself, scanning the skyline for familiar landmarks.
What did Mother always say about navigation?
The memory of her voice came back to me, clear as if she were standing beside me.
Look up Darius' offspring. The tall structures endure. They can guide you when all else fails.
Following her advice, I spotted a tilting skyscraper I recognized. Its upper floors were gone, sheared off by some long-ago catastrophe, but the remaining structure was distinctive enough to serve as a beacon. With renewed determination, I adjusted my course. Finally, after what felt like hours of careful navigation, I stood before the familiar manhole cover. It lay undisturbed, looking exactly as it had when I'd last emerged from the depths below. The metal was warm to the touch, heated by the day's unrelenting sun. Taking a deep breath, I pried it open and peered into the darkness. The underground tunnel stretched out before me, disappearing into inky blackness. The air that wafted up was damp and carried a faint, sweet scent that I now associated with the glowing tree and its fruit. It was stronger than I remembered, almost cloying in its intensity. With my spear at the ready, I descended into the tunnel. The darkness pressed in around me, a tangible presence that seemed to swallow the light. Patches of bioluminescent fungi clung to the damp walls, their soft, otherworldly glow casting strange shadows as I moved. The fungi's light pulsed gently, almost like a heartbeat, giving the tunnel an unsettling, living quality. I hadn't gone far when I heard the first chittering sounds. The eyeless, mole-like creatures that inhabited these tunnels were on the move. Unlike my last frantic journey through this place, I was prepared this time. As the first wave of mutant rodents surged toward me, I braced myself. Their pale, hairless bodies gleamed in the fungi's light, sharp teeth bared in mindless hunger. The spear proved its worth immediately. With its longer reach, I was able to dispatch the creatures before they could get close enough to bite or claw at me.
Too slow.
I muttered, surprising myself with a grim smile as another rat fell to my weapon. The sound of their bodies hitting the tunnel floor was oddly satisfying, a validation of my improved skills and preparation. As I progressed deeper into the tunnels, I began to feel a familiar vibration in the air. It was subtle at first, more of a sensation than a sound, but it grew stronger with each step. The tree was calling, its strange energy pulsing through the very stone around me. It thrummed through my body, a siren song of power and mystery. Finally, I emerged into the vast chamber that housed the glowing tree. Its ethereal light filled the space, casting rippling shadows on the curved walls. The tree itself seemed larger than I remembered, its branches reaching higher and spread wider. The fruits hung heavy on its boughs, their pulsing glow hypnotic and alluring. For a moment I stood transfixed by the sight. Then, shaking off the tree's hypnotic effect, I forced myself to focus on my surroundings. My eyes were drawn to the far side of the chamber, where I remembered seeing the new people disappear down a side passage.
No time like the present,
I said to myself, gripping my spear tightly. The sound of my voice, though quiet, seemed to reverberate through the chamber, a reminder of how small and insignificant I was in this alien place. As I made my way towards that unexplored tunnel, a part of me knew I should just grab one of the glowing fruits and leave. But a stronger part, the part that demanded answers and justice for Mother, pushed me forward. The unknown passage yawned before me, dark and foreboding. Whatever lay down that dark passage, I was determined to face it. For better or worse, my journey for truth was just beginning. With one last look at the glowing tree, I stepped into the shadows, my spear held high and my resolve unshaken. Chapter 7. The ethereal light of the glowing tree faded behind me as I approached the tunnel on the far side of the cavernous chamber. My heart pounded, each beat reverberating through my body. The rough makeshift spear felt reassuring in my calloused hands, its weight both a comfort and a reminder of the dangers ahead. I stepped into the tunnel's shadows, the air growing cooler and damper, carrying an earthy scent that tickled my nostrils. Memories of scavenging root cellars with Mother flooded back, a bittersweet pang in my chest. The narrow passage bore the marks of primitive tools, its walls rough and uneven under my exploring fingertips. Grooves and gouges scarred the stone, silent testaments to the new people's labor. Deeper into the maze-like network of corridors I ventured, pausing at each intersection to strain my senses. The silence pressed in, broken only by the soft scrape of my boots and my measured breathing. The musty scent of long undisturbed earth thickened the air.
Think,
I whispered, channeling Mother's teachings. Her stern yet caring voice seemed to echo in the stillness.
What would she do?
Following the main corridor where a faint breeze brushed against my skin, I noticed the subtle dance of dust particles in the dim light filtering from phosphorescent fungi clinging to the walls. My grip tightened on the spear, knuckles white with tension. Every muscle coiled, ready for action. Mother's stories of the new people's uncanny stealth and ability to blend with their surroundings echoed in my mind.
Stay alert,
I reminded myself, eyes darting to every shadow.
They could be anywhere.
As I navigated the winding passages, the monotony of stone and darkness was occasionally broken by patches of bioluminescent growth. Its soft glow cast dancing shadows that turned harmless rock formations into lurking threats. Gradually, the air changed, the dank smell giving way to something fresher, almost sweet. It reminded me of the fruit from the glowing tree, but wilder, more complex. The upward slope of the passage lifted my hopes with each step. A greenish light, different from the fungi's glow, filtered through the darkness ahead. My pace quickened, curiosity overriding caution. The tunnel widened, opening into a space so unexpected, so alien, that I froze, blinking in disbelief. Before me stretched a hidden oasis deep within the heart of the ruined city. Lush vegetation covered every surface, from the ground to the crumbling facades of collapsed buildings. The shimmering grass beneath my feet pulsed with an inner light, each blade a miniature beacon in shades of green and gold.
Impossible,
I breathed, crouching to examine the grass more closely. Its glow thrummed gently against my skin, almost like a heartbeat. This was no ordinary plant life. Somehow it had adapted to thrive in this highly radioactive environment, perhaps even feeding off the radiation itself. Trees scattered throughout the area, their branches heavy with glowing foliage. They grew from the most improbable places, jutting out from cracks in the concrete, perched atop mounds of rubble, their roots snaking through the remnants of the old world. The air in this hidden oasis was noticeably cleaner, free from the toxic haze that perpetually shrouded the wasteland above. I took a deep breath, savoring the unfamiliar sensation of filling my lungs with truly fresh air. The scent was a mixture of damp earth, sweet flora, and something undefinably alien. As I surveyed the surreal landscape, the ruins of the old world peeked through the verdant growth, concrete and steel embraced by vines and roots. In the distance, water trickled, its gentle sound a stark contrast to the oppressive silence of the tunnels. A strange flower caught my eye, its petals shimmering with an iridescent sheen, colors shifting in hypnotic patterns. Intrigued, I reached out to touch it. Instinct took over at the last moment. I yanked my hand back just as the flower's petals snapped shut with alarming speed and force. The sharp sound echoed through the chamber. If I had been a fraction of a second slower, I might have lost a finger.
Not everything here is as peaceful as it looks,
I muttered, heart racing from the close call. Sweat beaded on my forehead, a reminder of how easily this beautiful place could turn deadly. It was then that I felt it, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end, a primal warning honed by years in the wasteland. Slowly I turned, my eyes scanning the verdant landscape. Every shadow now held potential danger, every rustle of leaves a possible threat. There, in the distance, partially obscured by a curtain of luminescent vines, stood a figure. My breath caught in my throat as I took in the sight. Golden skin gleamed in the strange, filtered light, seeming to emanate from within like the surrounding plants. Silvery hair cascaded down shoulders broader and more muscular than any human I had ever seen. The figure's build perfectly blended strength and grace, equally suited for combat or dance. But it was the eyes that held me transfixed, large, luminous pupils that seemed to pierce right through me. They were the color of emeralds, but with an otherworldly depth that spoke of wisdom and experiences beyond my comprehension. Those eyes studied me with an intensity that made me feel exposed, vulnerable. I had found one of the new people, or more accurately, they had found me. My hand tightened on my spear, the rough handle grounding me in reality. I locked eyes with the distant figure, muscles tensing in anticipation. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The only sound was my own heartbeat, thundering in my ears. Then, without warning, the world exploded into motion. A sound behind me, the whisper of feet on grass, was my only warning. I started to turn, adrenaline surging through my veins, but I was too slow. Something hard struck the back of my head. Pain exploded through my skull, bright spots dancing across my vision. The world tilted and spun, the beautiful oasis blurring into a kaleidoscope of color and light. As consciousness slipped away, my last thought was of Mother. How disappointed she would be that I had let my guard down, that I had been caught so easily. The ground rushed up to meet me, and then darkness. When consciousness returned, it came in fragments. The first thing I became aware of was the pounding in my head, a relentless throbbing that seemed to echo through my entire body. Each pulse brought with it a wave of nausea, forcing me to swallow hard against the rising bile in my throat. Then came the realization that I was moving, or rather, swaying gently. The motion only intensified the queasiness in my stomach. Cool air brushed against my skin, carrying that same sweet alien scent I had noticed in the oasis. I forced my eyes open, immediately regretting it, as the world spun sickeningly around me. When my vision finally cleared, I found myself staring at the ground, disconcertingly far below. Panic surged through me as I realized my predicament. I was hanging upside down, suspended from what appeared to be one of the glowing trees. As my senses slowly returned, I pieced together my situation. My arms and legs were bound tightly with what felt like braided plant fibers. The ropes dug into my skin, rough and unyielding. Blood rushed to my head, making it throb in time with my racing heart. All of my gear had been stripped away, leaving me feeling exposed and vulnerable. The cool air raised goosebumps on my bare skin, a constant reminder of my helpless state. In the clearing below, I could make out a small camp, the sweet alien scent of the oasis mixed with the smoky aroma of a cooking fire. Several figures moved about, the new people I realized with a jolt. Their golden skin shimmered in the strange light, almost luminescent. Their movements were fluid and graceful, each step perfectly balanced, speaking of a deep connection to their environment. Some appeared to be warriors, their muscular bodies adorned with intricate tattoos that seemed to shift and change in the dappled light. The hypnotic patterns hinted at meanings I couldn't begin to decipher. Long knives hung at their sides, the blades crafted from a material that gleamed with an inner light, not metal, but something else entirely. Their long, silvery hair was tied back in intricate knots, each style seemingly unique. I assumed they held some significance, perhaps denoting rank or accomplishment. The styles reminded me of the warrior braids Mother had described in her stories of ancient Earth cultures, complex and beautiful in their practicality. I tried to call out, to demand answers, but my throat was parched, my tongue thick and clumsy in my mouth. The words came out as a hoarse croak, barely audible even to my own ears. My captors paid me no attention, going about their business as if I were nothing more than an unusual piece of fruit hanging from their tree. As the hours stretched into days, I began to lose track of time. The constant discomfort of my position, the gnawing hunger, and the maddening thirst all blurred together into a haze of misery. The glow of the vegetation never dimmed, creating an eternal twilight that further disoriented me. It wasn't until what I assumed was the second day that any of them acknowledged my existence. A female approached, her silver hair gleaming in the perpetual twilight of this underground world. Her angular face featured high cheekbones and those same piercing, emerald eyes I had seen before. Her expression was an unreadable mask of calm that betrayed no emotion. Without a word, she climbed up to where I hung, her movements as graceful as a cat's. Gently, she tilted my head back, her touch cool against my feverish skin. Cool water touched my parched lips, and I drank greedily, not caring if it might be drugged or poisoned. The relief was immediate and overwhelming. When I tried to thank her, to plead for more information, she spoke in a language I couldn't understand.
Anay spayo laiway olwaido plabesay anlaiming helyo oyoway bedis piling by the gay ANS.
I blinked in confusion, trying to make sense of the strange sounds. Her eyes bore into mine, conveying a warning I couldn't quite grasp. Before I could respond, she was gone, descending the tree with the same fluid grace, leaving me alone once more with my thoughts and the constant, eerie glow of this alien world. The loneliness pressed in, as tangible as the ropes binding me. Questions swirled in my mind, each bringing with it a fresh wave of anxiety. What did they want with me? Why keep me alive? And most pressingly, how was I going to escape? Days blurred together in a haze of discomfort and uncertainty. The constant pressure of blood rushing to my head made it difficult to think clearly. My body ached from the unnatural position, muscles cramping and joints stiffening. The ropes chafed against my skin, leaving raw, painful marks. My mind raced with questions that had no answers. The new people continued their routines around me, their purpose and intentions remaining a mystery. I watched them, trying to glean any information I could from their actions and interactions. Their society seemed highly organized, with clear hierarchies and roles. The warriors moved with disciplined precision, their patrols following patterns I struggled to decipher. Others tended to the luminescent plants, their hands moving with practiced ease as they pruned and harvested. Some engaged in complex rituals involving the strange, glowing flora, gathering in small groups, chanting in their melodic language while manipulating the plants in ways I couldn't understand. On what I believed to be the third day, I was offered food. A tribe member approached, carrying a strange, tuberous root. Its skin was mottled with patches of bioluminescence, pulsing softly in the perpetual twilight. The new person pressed it to my lips, their expression impassive. Despite my suspicion, hunger overrode caution. I took a bite, the texture firm yet yielding between my teeth. The taste was unlike anything I had experienced, simultaneously bitter and sweet with an aftertaste that left my mouth tingling. It seemed to spread warmth through my body, dulling the ache in my muscles.
"Thank you,"
I said, my voice hoarse from disuse. The words felt clumsy on my tongue after days of silence.
"Please, can you tell me why I'm here?"
But my words were met with the same impassive silence that had greeted all my previous attempts at communication. The figure retreated, leaving me to ponder the purpose of this ordeal. Was this a test? A form of interrogation, or simply a way to break my will? Mother's teachings echoed in my mind, reminding me to stay strong, to observe and learn even in the direst circumstances. Her voice, a mix of comfort and stern guidance, kept me grounded as the days wore on. I focused on the camp below, committing every detail to memory. The layout of their dwellings, constructed from a mix of salvaged materials and living plants. The way they communicated, not just with words, but with subtle gestures and expressions. The ebb and flow of their daily activities dictated by rhythms I couldn't quite grasp. On the 7th day, everything changed. I was jolted awake by the sensation of falling. The rope that had held me was cut. For a heart-stopping moment, I plummeted towards the ground, the world spinning around me. In that split second, as the earth rushed up to meet me, something inside me seemed to awaken. My body moved with a speed and agility I didn't know I possessed. I twisted in midair, my muscles responding with a strength that defied my weakened state. I managed to land in a roll that dispersed much of the impact, the soft, glowing grass cushioning my fall. As I came to a stop, I found myself face to face with 4 of the new people warriors. They stood in a semicircle, their postures alert but not overtly aggressive. Their expressions were unreadable, but I sensed a mixture of surprise and approval in their stance. Had this been part of their plan all along? A test of some kind? Without a word, they moved forward. I tensed, ready to fight or flee, but they simply bound my hands in front of me with the same plant fiber rope. Their touch was firm, but not rough. Their movements efficient and practiced. The warriors began to lead me towards one of the larger structures in the camp, a building that lay on its side, repurposed to serve some unknown function. Its walls were a mix of crumbling concrete and living vines, the latter seeming to hold the structure together as much as infiltrate it. As we approached, signs of habitation became more apparent. The flicker of firelight danced from within, casting shifting shadows on the walls. The murmur of voices speaking in that strange melodic language grew louder, punctuated by the occasional clang of what might have been cooking utensils. The scent of the air changed too. The ever-present sweet alien aroma of the oasis mingled with something new, a savory smell that made my empty stomach clench with hunger. It was reminiscent of the stews Mother used to make from our scavenged finds, but with unfamiliar notes that hinted at ingredients I couldn't begin to guess. My heart raced with a mixture of fear and anticipation. My legs, weak from days of disuse, trembled with each step. The cool grass beneath my bare feet gave way to smooth stone as we reached the entrance of the structure. I swallowed nervously, realizing that this moment would likely decide what they were going to do with me. The warrior's grip on my arms tightened slightly, not painfully, but enough to remind me of my captive status. Their skin was warm against mine, almost feverishly so, and I could feel the strength in their hands. Given how I had been treated so far, my survival seemed far from certain. Yet they had kept me alive, fed me even if in the most basic way. There had to be a purpose to it all, a reason for this elaborate ordeal. As we reached the entrance, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever lay ahead. The air from inside washed over me, warm and heavy with the scent of bodies and cooking food. It carried a charge of anticipation as if the very atmosphere was aware of the significance of this moment. I strained my eyes, trying to peer into the dimly lit interior. Shadows moved within, figures passing in front of what must have been a central fire. The voices inside hushed as we approached, the sudden silence adding to the tension. One of the warriors stepped forward, ducking slightly to enter the repurposed building. He spoke in their language, his tone respectful but firm. There was a pause, then a response from within, a single word that carried the weight of authority. The warrior turned back to me, his emerald eyes reflecting the glow of the plants around us. For the first time, I saw something akin to emotion in his gaze, a flicker of what might have been sympathy, quickly masked. He gestured for me to enter, his movements deliberate and slow, as if he wanted to be sure I understood. I hesitated for a moment, every instinct screaming at me to run, to fight, to do anything but walk willingly into what could very well be my doom. But where would I run to? This place was as alien to me as the outside world would be to them. And even if I could escape, I'd be no closer to finding the answers I sought. About the fruit, about Mother, about my own strange resilience to radiation. Taking a deep breath, I squared my shoulders as best I could with my hands bound. Mother's voice echoed in my mind, reminding me to face challenges head on, to show strength even when I felt anything but strong.
Whatever happens,
I thought to myself.
I'll face it on my feet.
With that resolve, I stepped forward into the waiting darkness. The warm air enveloped me as I crossed the threshold, carrying with it the weight of unknown expectations and the promise of long-awaited answers. Whatever fate awaited me in this alien court, I was ready to meet it. Chapter 8. Darkness enveloped me as I stepped into the fallen building, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and something undefinably alien pressed against my skin. My eyes struggled to adjust to the dim interior, the harsh glare of the wasteland still imprinted on my vision. Gradually, shapes emerged from the gloom. The structure, once an old-world office building, had been transformed in unimaginable ways. Concrete and steel formed the skeleton, but living vines and tree roots had become part of its essence. They intertwined with the man-made materials, creating a bizarre fusion of nature and ruin. My bare feet felt the contrast between cold stone and warm, pulsing plant matter with each step. The floor seemed to breathe beneath me, a subtle reminder of the strange life that had taken hold here. The space opened up, revealing a large communal area. At its center burned a fire, its flames casting flickering shadows that danced across the walls. The crackling of burning wood broke the eerie silence. Smoke rose lazily towards a makeshift chimney, an ingenious adaptation of this alien environment to the new people's needs. As my vision cleared, I saw 3 figures seated on the far side of the fire pit. Unlike the younger new people I had encountered with their light golden skin and silver hair, these individuals bore the marks of age. Deep wrinkles etched their faces, strange tattoos or markings adorning their foreheads, symbols of authority, their meanings as foreign to me as everything else in this place. 2 men and a woman sat before me, their posture regal despite their advanced years. The man in the middle sported a beard that, had he been standing, would have reached well past his belt. Its silvery strands caught the firelight, seeming to glow with an inner radiance. All 3 wore robes of a quality I had never seen in the wastelands. Intricate patterns were woven into fabric that seemed to shimmer and shift in the firelight as if alive. A firm hand on my shoulder pushed me down to sit on the opposite side of the fire pit. The heat from the flames washed over me, a stark contrast to the cool air at my back. For a long moment, the elders observed me, their eyes reflecting the dancing flames. The silence stretched on, broken only by the occasional pop and crackle of burning wood. Finally, the bearded man in the center leaned forward. Deep lines around his eyes crinkled as he focused on me. When he spoke, his voice was low and gravelly, carrying the weight of decades.
Welcome, all the world there. You stand before a tale council of Eleres.
The words, though strange, carried hints of familiarity. Before I could attempt a response, the man held up a hand, palm outward, a clear gesture for silence. I closed my mouth, swallowing the greeting I had been about to offer. The taste of ash and fear lingered on my tongue. The elders began to converse among themselves. Their words flowed in a rhythmic cadence that, while beautiful, remained mostly foreign to my ears. I strained to catch any familiar sounds, any clue to their intentions, but it was useless. Their language, like everything else about them, was just beyond my grasp of understanding. A commotion behind me drew my attention. I turned, muscles tensing instinctively. 2 figures approached. A new people warrior, his tattoos seeming to writhe in the shifting light, escorting a young woman who looked to be my age. As they stepped into the firelight, I felt my breath catch in my throat. The young woman could have been my mother's twin, albeit younger. Her silver hair cascaded down her back, catching the light and seeming to glow with an inner radiance. Fair skin, unblemished by the harsh realities of the wasteland, contrasted sharply with eyes that shimmered like jewels in the flickering light. Those eyes, a shade of purple I had never seen before, locked onto mine. In them, I saw a reflection of my own curiosity, tinged with something else. Recognition, perhaps. Or was it merely my imagination, desperate for any connection in this alien place? The young woman approached the fire pit, her movements fluid and graceful. She bowed deeply to the elders, the gesture smooth and practiced. When she spoke, her voice was clear and melodious, carrying easily over the crackle of the fire.
Greetings, Reverend Eleres. I have a komai as requested.
The bearded elder nodded, his expression unchanging. He turned his attention back to me, eyes narrowing slightly. When he spoke again, his tone was commanding, the strange words flowing with an authority that needed no translation.
Why you have come here, Old Worlder? You have not been given permission to enter our lands. Additionally, you have desecrated our holy sacred tree, act punishable by death. But out of respect for your people, we wish to understand your origins and purpose. Especially since it is unusual for your kind to survive the purification.
The young woman turned to me, her expression neutral. The firelight danced across her features, highlighting the subtle differences between us. Where my skin was honey brown, hers was pale as moonlight. My short-cropped silver hair, kept that way for practicality in the wasteland, contrasted with her flowing locks. Yet there was something in the shape of her face, the set of her eyes, that spoke of a shared heritage I couldn't quite grasp. When she spoke, it was in perfect, unaccented English.
The Supreme Elder demands to know why you have come here, Old Worlder. You have not been given permission to enter our lands. Additionally, you have desecrated our holy sacred tree, an act punishable by death. But out of respect for your people, they wish to understand your origins and purpose, especially since it is unusual for your kind to survive the purification.
I blinked, taken aback by both her flawless translation and the gravity of the situation. The purification, did they mean the radiation in the red zones? And the tree I had taken fruit from was sacred to them? My mind raced, realizing the precariousness of my position. The air in the chamber seemed to grow thicker, charged with tension. Sweat beaded on my forehead, a mixture of nervousness and the heat from the fire. I could feel the weight of the elders' gazes upon me, their eyes reflecting the dancing flames as they awaited my response. I took a deep breath, knowing that my next words could mean the difference between life and death. The scent of burning wood mixed with the alien sweetness that seemed to permeate this place, grounding me in the moment. Lying was out of the question. They clearly knew about my taking of the fruit. The only path forward was complete honesty. With as much reverence as I could muster, I leaned forward, clasping my hands together. The rough calluses on my palms, earned through years of survival in the wasteland, pressed against each other as I bowed my head until my forehead touched the ground. The cool stone against my skin was a stark contrast to the warmth of the fire at my front.
Great Supreme Elder,
I began, my voice earnest and tinged with fear.
I had no idea that the tree was sacred to you and your people. I am ignorant of the ways of your people in this land. As you said, I am an old worlder, and at only 15 years of age, I am ignorant of many things. I was not taught the proper customs for dealing with your great people.
I paused, allowing the translator to convey my words. The musical cadence of her voice filled the chamber as she spoke in their language. When she finished, I continued, my words coming faster now.
I came here searching for a cure for my mother. She was very ill, and none of the medicines for my settlement would work. She grew sicker with each passing day, and I knew that without intervention, she would die. It was by accident that I found myself in your lands, pushed here by hostile wildlife. When I discovered your sacred tree and realized its healing properties, I couldn't hesitate. I took some of the fruit to give to my sick mother.
As I spoke, the translator relayed my words in their language, her voice rising and falling in a rhythmic pattern that was both alien and oddly soothing.
Greater Suprema Elder, he had no idea that the tree was sacred to you and your people. He is ignorant of the ways of our people on this land. As we have said, he is an old worlder, and not only 15 cycles, he is ignorant of many things. He was not taught the proper customs for dealing with our greater people.
The elders listened intently, their expressions unreadable. The firelight cast deep shadows across their faces, making their already inscrutable features even harder to interpret. When the translator finished, they began to discuss among themselves, their voices low and urgent. I remained in my bowed position, heart pounding, as I awaited their response. After what felt like an eternity, the female elder spoke. Her voice was softer than the men's, but carried no less authority. It reminded me of the wind whistling through the ruins of the old world, both gentle and unyielding.
Hawakanati sabay, tile fruita isa toxika, to older world erais. Evena why only usai ita fora tile dinga.
The translator turned to me, her purple eyes reflecting the firelight. They seemed to swirl with an inner depth, like looking into a twilight sky. Her voice carried a note of skepticism as she relayed the elder's words.
The elder says this cannot be true. The fruit from the sacred tree is highly toxic to old worlders. Even our people only dare to use it when fatally ill and have no other way to heal our sick and dying. The fruit as often kills as it can cure or heal. By that measure, it should have been absolutely fatal to one of your kind. How can this be the truth when we know of its deadly consequences for your people? She believes you are lying, boy.
I frowned, puzzled by this information. The memory of consuming the fruit flooded back. The burst of sweetness on my tongue, the rush of energy through my body. I had felt no ill effects. Quite the opposite, in fact. I had found it intoxicatingly delicious and invigorating. The contradiction between my experience and their words sent a chill down my spine. Choosing my words carefully, I responded, my voice steady despite the nervous flutter in my stomach.
I swear to you, I am not lying. What I tell you is the truth. The fruit was given to my mother, and it did help restore her health.
As the translator conveyed my words, I saw skepticism deepen on the elders' faces. Their brows furrowed, creating deep valleys in their already weathered skin. The one who had not yet spoken leaned forward, his voice gravelly with age. It reminded me of rocks grinding together in a landslide.
Where isa disa woman anoa? Why must I see a hera to verify a yura wordsa?
The translator's voice carried a hint of urgency as she asked,
Where is this woman now? They wish to gauge the truthfulness of your words. If she is alive, then they will know you speak the truth, and your great sin towards our people can be forgiven.
My heart sank, a leaden weight in my chest. The memory of my mother's fate washed over me anew, as fresh and painful as the moment it happened. The acrid smell of smoke and blood filled my nostrils, a phantom scent from that terrible day. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry, knowing my next words could seal my fate.
My mother,
I began, my voice cracking slightly. I paused, took a deep breath, and forced the words out.
My mother is now dead.
As soon as the translator relayed this, the chamber erupted in angry exclamations. The elders' voices rose in a cacophony of harsh sounds, their words unintelligible but their meaning clear. They pointed accusingly at me, their faces contorted with rage. The firelight cast their shadows large on the walls, making them seem like looming giants ready to pass judgment. The young woman's voice was grim as she translated their outburst, her purple eyes now hard as amethysts.
You see? He is lying. There is no need to deliberate further. We should kill him and be done with this matter.
Panic surged through me, a cold wave that contrasted sharply with the heat of the fire. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. I spoke quickly, my words tumbling out in a desperate rush to clarify.
Please, you misunderstand. My mother did not die from the fruit. She was killed in an attack by authorities from my old settlement. They wanted the fruit for financial gain, I believe, and she resisted them. But I promise you, the fruit was not poisonous to my mother. Even I consumed it and survived. What I tell you is the truth, I swear it.
The translator spoke rapidly, her melodic voice rising and falling as she conveyed my desperate explanation.
Plesa, you misunstanda. My mother did not die from the fruit. She was killed in an attack by authorities from my old settlement. They wanted the fruit for financial gain, I believe, and she resisted them. But I promise you, the fruit was no poisonous to my mother. Even I consumed it and survived. What I tell you is the truth. I swear it.
As her words faded, the chamber fell silent. The only sound was the crackling of the fire and my own ragged breathing. The air felt thick, charged with tension. I could taste the metallic tang of fear on my tongue. The elders exchanged long, meaningful looks, their expressions unreadable in the flickering firelight. Their weathered faces seemed to be carved from stone, giving no hint of their thoughts. The moment stretched on, each second feeling like an eternity. Finally, the bearded elder in the center spoke, his voice low and measured. It rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder.
Ifa tisa isa truai, thena you maya by forgivena. Butawai musta testa yura wordsa.
The translator's voice was solemn as she relayed his words.
If what you have said is true, then you may be forgiven your great sin. But we must test this claim. Though if you are lying, you may ultimately wish for the quicker death, instead of the slow death the fruit often brings to your kind.
My mouth went dry at these words, a cold sweat breaking out across my skin despite the warmth of the fire. Before I could respond, The bearded elder made a gesture, his gnarled hand moving through the air with surprising grace. An attendant appeared from the shadows, seeming to materialize out of the darkness. In their hands was one of the glowing, pomegranate-like fruits, wrapped carefully in shimmering cloth. The fruit's faint luminescence cast a soft, otherworldly glow on the attendant's golden skin. With deliberate movements, the attendant produced a wooden cup, or rather, a small bowl. Its surface was polished smooth, reflecting the firelight. They used a knife to split open the fruit, its radiant juice spilling into the vessel. The scent, sweet and intoxicating, filled the air. It brought back vivid memories of my first encounter with the fruit, the burst of flavor, the rush of energy, the miraculous healing. The Supreme Elder took the bowl, raising it high as he spoke words that sounded like a blessing. His voice resonated with power and authority.
Maya tisa fruita revela tail truta and bringa justiça.
He then handed the bowl back to the attendant, who approached me slowly. Every step seemed to echo in the chamber, marking the moments until my fate would be decided. I sat up straighter, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone in the room could hear it. The attendant placed the bowl in my hands, its weight surprisingly substantial. The wood felt warm against my palms, almost alive. I looked down at the glowing liquid, its surface rippling slightly with my trembling hands. The familiar aroma wafted up, tempting and terrifying in equal measure. It smelled of life and death, of hope and danger, a perfect encapsulation of my current situation. Glancing up, I met the eyes of each elder in turn. Their gazes were intense, scrutinizing my every movement. The translator's expression remained carefully neutral, but I thought I saw a flicker of something, concern perhaps, in her purple eyes. For a moment I hesitated. If what they said was true, this juice could be fatally poisonous to me. The thought of a slow, painful death made my stomach churn. But then again, I had consumed it before without ill effects. More than that, I knew this was my only chance to prove my innocence, and possibly to learn more about my own strange heritage. Taking a deep breath, I raised the bowl to my lips. The sweet scent filled my nostrils as I tilted it back, the cool liquid touching my tongue. Without pause, I drank deeply, not stopping until I had drained every last drop. As I lowered the empty bowl, I could feel all eyes upon me, waiting to see what would happen next. The fruit's juice seemed to burn pleasantly as it went down, spreading a warmth through my body that was at once familiar and exhilarating. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, a tingling sensation began in my fingertips, spreading rapidly up my arms and throughout my body. The world around me seemed to sharpen, colors becoming more vivid, sounds more clear. I could hear the elders' heartbeats, smell the individual components of the incense burning in the corner. I looked up at the elders, my enhanced senses taking in every detail of their focused expressions. Chapter 9. The tingling sensation of the fruit's juice gradually faded, my senses returning to what passed for normal in this strange, isolated chamber. Silence reigned, broken only by the soft crackle of the fire. The air hung heavy with anticipation, thick with the lingering sweetness of the fruit and the earthy scent of damp stone. For what felt like an eternity, the elders and I locked eyes. Their gazes bore into me, intense and scrutinizing. Deep furrows etched their brows as they watched, waiting to see if I would succumb to any adverse effects. The firelight danced across their weathered faces, casting deep shadows that made their expressions even harder to read. In truth, I noticed little difference from my first experience with the fruit. A familiar warmth spread through my body, soothing the aches and pains from days of captivity. The dull headache that had been my constant companion, born of hunger and stress, melted away. Even my mind felt clearer, sharper, as if a fog had lifted. As the moments stretched on, I found my attention drawn to the young translator. She stood slightly apart from the others, her posture tense, hands clasped tightly in front of her. Unlike the new people, with their golden skin and pointed ears, she was an anomaly. Her appearance bore an uncanny resemblance to my mother, or rather, she shared features I had come to associate with my mother's unknown heritage. The translator's silver hair cascaded down her back, catching the firelight and seeming to glow with an inner radiance. Her fair skin, unblemished by the harsh realities of the wasteland, stood in stark contrast to my own honey-brown complexion. But it was her eyes that truly captivated me, a shade of purple so vivid it seemed almost unreal, like twilight made flesh. The silence was finally broken by the eldest of the council. His voice, gravelly with age, flowed like water over stones as he spoke in their melodious language.
Tail fruita, hais nota, harmayed hima. Perhaps hisa wordsa ara truai.
The young woman's head snapped up, her eyes widening slightly. When she translated, her voice carried a note of surprise that mirrored my own feelings.
The fruit has not harmed him. Perhaps his words are true.
The chamber erupted into a flurry of whispered conversations. The elders began to deliberate among themselves, their voices low but animated. I caught snippets of their discussion, words that sounded tantalizingly familiar yet remained just beyond my comprehension. My heart pounded in my chest as I waited, acutely aware of how much hinged on their decision. The cool stone beneath me contrasted sharply with the warmth still flowing through my veins from the fruit. Every sense seemed heightened. I could hear the rustle of robes as the elders shifted, smell the faint musk of their sweat mingling with the smoke from the fire. Finally, they seemed to reach a consensus. The bearded elder in the center, his silver hair gleaming in the firelight, turned to address me directly. His words flowed with the same musical cadence I was beginning to associate with their language, but the meaning remained a mystery. I turned expectantly to the translator, noting the way her slender fingers twisted together as she listened. She nodded, tucking a strand of silver hair behind her ear before speaking.
The elders are satisfied with the truthfulness of your words, as it seems you are truly unharmed and can consume the fruit from the sacred tree. However, there is still the matter to be decided of what to do with you. You have found our village, and to let you go could be a danger to us, considering that you clearly come from a people that are able to endure and survive the purification.
As she finished speaking, I could feel the weight of the elders' gazes upon me once more. The air in the chamber seemed to grow thicker, charged with the gravity of the moment. I knew that my next words would be crucial in determining my fate. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, I bowed deeply once more. The cool stone pressed against my forehead, grounding me in the moment. The scent of damp earth filled my nostrils, mingling with the lingering sweetness of the fruit. When I spoke, I chose my words carefully, aware that my future hung in the balance.
Honorable elders, I understand your concerns. Since my mother was killed by the authorities of my old settlement, I fled into the wilderness to escape capture. I had been wandering the wastelands, surviving on my own, before deciding to return here. I hope to explore this area more thoroughly and possibly find answers about my mother and my own heritage.
I paused, lifting my head slightly to watch the translator. Her melodic voice filled the chamber as she spoke in their language, her hands moving gracefully to emphasize certain words.
Honorable Elires, he understands a Yura concerns. Sinca hisa modera was killed by thy authorities of hisa olda settlement. He fled into a thy wilderness to escape a capturai. He had been wandering the West Islands, surviving on his own, before deciding to return a here. He hoped to explore this area more thoroughly and possibly find answers about his modera and his own heritage.
Taking a deep breath, the musty air of the chamber filling my lungs, I continued,
I have no place to go, nor am I headed anywhere in particular. If you are willing, I would like to ask for asylum. I'm still very much ignorant about many things, and I can see that your people are wise and noble. Knowing much about our world, I feel there is much I can learn and benefit from if you can teach me your ways. At the very least, it should help me avoid insulting or committing sacrilege towards you or any of your kind in the future if I understand the proper way to interact with you.
As the translator relayed my words, I noticed a change in her demeanor. Her eyes widened slightly, and her voice took on a curious lilt, particularly when speaking about my unique background and lack of knowledge about my origins. The elders listened intently, their weathered faces impassive in the flickering firelight. The chamber fell silent once more as the elders deliberated. I could hear the soft rustle of their robes as they leaned in close to one another, their whispered words too low for me to catch. The fire crackled, sending sparks dancing into the air. Sweat beaded on my forehead, both from the heat and the tension of the moment. After what felt like an eternity, the central elder spoke again. His voice rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder, the strange words flowing with an authority that needed no translation. I turned to the translator, noting the slight upturn of her lips as she listened. When she spoke, her voice carried a note of approval.
The elders are amenable to this arrangement and compliment you on your wisdom for recognizing your ignorance. They are willing to remedy this illness of the mind, as you seem to be someone of particular interest, one who can survive and consume the fruit as you do. They feel there may be lessons they can also learn from you. You will teach each other.
Relief washed over me, though I knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one filled with as many uncertainties as the wasteland I had left behind. The tension in my muscles began to ease, and I realized how exhausted I truly was. The bearded elder made a gesture and 2 guards stepped forward from the shadows. Their golden skin seemed to glow in the firelight, a stark contrast to the dark leather of their armor. As they approached, I could hear the soft clink of metal, perhaps hidden weapons or charms woven into their clothing. The translator's voice softened as she added,
They will escort you to your new quarters. Rest now. Your lessons begin tomorrow.
With the decision made, the elders called for the guards. My bindings were cut, the ropes falling away to reveal raw, chafed skin beneath. The sudden freedom sent pins and needles through my arms and legs, a reminder of how long I'd been restrained. 2 guards flanked me, their golden skin seeming to glow in the strange ambient light of the chamber. We walked through winding passages, the living architecture of vines and roots, intertwining with remnants of the old world. The air grew cooler as we moved deeper into the complex, carrying a damp, earthy scent mixed with something alien and sweet. Our footsteps echoed off the walls, a rhythmic sound punctuated by the occasional drip of water from unseen sources. Eventually, we arrived at what appeared to be a partially collapsed warehouse. Its cavernous interior was dimly lit by the same bioluminescent plants I had seen throughout the settlement. The soft blue-green glow cast eerie shadows on the walls, making the space seem larger and more mysterious than it probably was. The guards gestured for me to sit and wait. I complied, sinking down onto a makeshift bench fashioned from salvaged materials. The cool surface beneath me was a stark reminder of how far I was from the world I had known. The metal creaked slightly under my weight, the sound amplified in the quiet space. As I waited, I took in my surroundings. The warehouse was a study in contrasts, crumbling concrete and rusted metal juxtaposed with thriving alien plant life. It was as if nature itself was reclaiming the ruins of the old world, guided by the hand of the new people. Vines as thick as my arms snaked up the walls, their leaves pulsing with a faint inner light. In one corner, a cluster of mushrooms glowed softly, their caps an otherworldly shade of purple. The air here was different from the council chamber. It carried the musty scent of decay, but also something fresher, like the air after a rainstorm, but with an unfamiliar twist. I could taste something metallic on my tongue, perhaps residual radiation or some byproduct of the strange flora. After what felt like hours but was likely only about 30 minutes, a familiar figure approached. The young translator walked towards us, her footsteps almost silent on the debris-strewn floor. She spoke briefly to the guards in their melodious language, her voice carrying easily in the large space. The guards nodded and stepped back, apparently dismissed from their duties. For a long moment, she simply looked at me, her iridescent purple eyes seeming to peer into my very soul. The strange light of the chamber made her silver hair shimmer, creating an almost halo-like effect around her head. Her fair skin stood out starkly against the shadowy backdrop of the warehouse. Then, without a word, she sat down across from me. The bench creaked slightly as she settled her weight. It was only then that I noticed the native-made satchel on her back. The bag was crafted from some kind of leather I didn't recognize, dyed a deep green and adorned with intricate patterns that seemed to shift in the dim light. The silence between us was palpable, filled with unasked questions and unspoken truths. I could feel the weight of her gaze, assessing me just as I was assessing her. The air seemed to thicken with anticipation, as if the very atmosphere was aware of the significance of this moment. The translator reached into her satchel, the leather creaking softly as she opened it. She produced what looked like strips of animal jerky, the meat dark and glistening in the dim light. The scent that wafted from the dried meat was unfamiliar but not unpleasant, a mix of smokiness and something herbal I couldn't quite place. She also offered me a water skin, made from an animal hide I didn't recognize, its surface smooth and slightly iridescent.
Drink slowly,
she advised, her voice softer now that we were alone. The gentle lilt of her accent was more noticeable in the quiet of the warehouse.
Those who drink too quickly after being starved often throw back up their food.
I nodded gratefully, taking her advice. The water skin felt cool against my palms as I raised it to my lips. The water was clean and refreshing, a stark contrast to the irradiated puddles I had sometimes been forced to drink from in the wasteland. It tasted faintly of minerals, but lacked the metallic tang I'd grown accustomed to. The jerky was tough but flavorful, unlike anything I had tasted before. It had a spicy kick that lingered on my tongue, warming me from the inside. As we ate in silence, I studied her more closely. Her silver hair was tied back in a ponytail, similar to the other new people females I had seen in the camp. A few stray strands framed her face, catching the bioluminescent light and seeming to glow. Her garments, made of a fabric I didn't recognize, seemed to shimmer slightly in the dim light. The material looked soft yet durable, its color a deep blue that reminded me of the night sky. The curiosity between us was almost palpable, filling the air with an electric tension. I could see the questions burning in her eyes, the purple irises seeming to swirl with unspoken thoughts. Her gaze mirrored my own desperate need for answers, a hunger that rivaled my physical one. It was only a matter of time before one of us gave in to that curiosity. Finally, she spoke, breaking the silence that had stretched between us.
The elders have assigned me the task of teaching you our language so you can properly communicate and talk as one who is seen.
I tilted my head, intrigued by the term. The jerky spice still tingled on my tongue as I asked,
"Are you someone who is seen?"
I assumed the word was their way of describing someone civilized or recognized as one of their own. She nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. The expression softened her features, making her look younger, more approachable.
I am,
she confirmed, her voice carrying a hint of pride. Emboldened by her openness, I asked the question that had been nagging at me since I first saw her.
How is it that you're among these people when you're clearly not related to them?
Her expression grew somber, the smile fading from her lips. She took a deep breath, her shoulders rising and falling with the motion. When she began to speak, her voice was quieter, as if she was sharing a secret.
I was captured around the age of 10 from my settlement, a place connected to Bunker 17 research laboratories.
She paused, her eyes distant as if looking into the past.
They explained that after breeding enough specimens, they were able to reach the next stage of development by establishing one of the first settlements inhabiting a red zone.
The implications of her words hung heavy in the air between us. I could feel my heart rate quicken as pieces of a larger puzzle began to fall into place. Her story was painting a picture that began to illuminate the greater world, and likely my mother's origins as well. The warehouse around us seemed to fade into the background as I focused entirely on her words, hungry for more information. My mind raced with implications as I formulated my next question. The cool metal of the bench beneath me seemed to ground me in reality as I grappled with the weight of these revelations.
Are there more like you who can survive and resist the purification of the red zones?
I asked, deliberately using their term for radiation. The words felt strange on my tongue, a mix of the familiar and the alien. She nodded, her eyes distant as if recalling memories. The bioluminescent light cast shadows across her face, accentuating the faraway look in her purple eyes.
Yes,
she confirmed, her voice soft but clear in the quiet warehouse.
I came from a settlement of 50. The overseer was an old worlder who had to wear heavy protection and live in a specialized dome to survive, along with his security force of about 5 soldiers. But the rest of us were all born in the breeding labs. Most of us were female. Only 10% of our number were actually male.
I absorbed this information, feeling as if pieces of a puzzle were finally falling into place. Yet so many questions remained, each answer spawning a dozen more. The air around us seemed to thicken with the weight of unspoken truths. I chose my next words carefully, my voice barely above a whisper.
Have any of you ever been known to escape the facility? Would you know anything about that?
She considered my question for a long moment before answering. Her fingers idly traced patterns on the surface of her water skin, the movement almost hypnotic in the dim light.
I can't be completely sure as I wasn't someone privy to such information.
She began hesitantly.
But the only subject I know of that actually escaped was over 20 years ago, a female known as Prime Specimen 2415. She was designated as the first of the Prime series, as her genetic makeup was very unique. She had far above average genetic resistance to radiation and had an absorption rate of over 80%, as well as other heightened traits that none of the other specimens had.
She paused, her gaze sharpening as it focused back on me. The intensity in her eyes made me feel as if she was looking right through me, seeing something I couldn't.
Now that I've answered a few of your questions, I believe that has earned me some goodwill, so please, answer a few of mine. You said in the chamber that you didn't know where you were from. Is that because you have no memory of this, or is it because you simply do not know?
I answered honestly, the truth leaving a bitter taste in my mouth.
My mother always kept her past secret. She told me it would be dangerous for me to know anything about it. She died before revealing anything of real significance to me.
The translator leaned forward, her eyes intent. The movement brought her closer, and I could smell the faint, sweet scent that seemed to cling to all the new people.
What was your mother's appearance like?
She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I described my mother, confirming what I suspected was her hunch.
She very much had the look of you and your people, I would assume. Her hair was the same, as well as her eye color and fair skin.
As I finished speaking, I realized we had been talking for some time without properly introducing ourselves. The absurdity of it struck me suddenly, a moment of normalcy in this surreal situation.
I'm sorry,
I said,
but in my settlement, it's usually customary to begin acquaintanceships by exchanging names. My name is Darius. May I please know what I should call you?
She blushed slightly, a faint pink tinging her pale cheeks.
My name is Celia of the Elite series, Elite Specimen 3701.
She said.
My series was originally named to be a supporting series to the Prime series, but that never came to pass because the Prime series had to be discontinued after the escape of 2415 Priscilla.
At the mention of that name, I froze, my water skin slipping from suddenly numb fingers. It clattered to the floor, the sound echoing in the cavernous space. The implications of what she had just said crashed over me like a wave, threatening to drown me in a sea of revelations and new questions. Chapter 10. The water skin slipped from my suddenly numb fingers, clattering to the ground. The sound echoed through the cavernous warehouse, startlingly loud in the sudden silence. Cool liquid seeped into my worn pants, but I barely noticed. My mind reeled from the name Celia had just uttered. Priscilla, my mother's name. The implications were staggering, threatening to upend everything I thought I knew about my origins. Celia's purple eyes widened with concern, the bioluminescent light reflecting off them like miniature galaxies. Her silver hair seemed to glow faintly, creating an ethereal halo around her face.
What's the matter? Did I say something wrong?
Her voice, tinged with worry, brought me back to the present. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry despite the water I'd just been drinking. The slight metallic aftertaste coated my tongue.
My mother,
I began, my voice barely above a whisper.
Her name was Priscilla.
The effect of my words on Celia was immediate and profound. Her fair skin paled even further, taking on an almost translucent quality. Her eyes grew impossibly wide, the purple irises seeming to swirl with shock and realization. I could almost see the thoughts racing behind those iridescent orbs as she made the same connection I had. If my mother was Priscilla, then she had to be Prime Specimen 2415. The warehouse suddenly felt smaller, the crumbling walls closing in around us. The air thickened, heavy with the weight of this revelation. The bioluminescent plants that clung to the walls seemed to pulse more intensely, their blue-green light casting shifting shadows across Celia's stunned face. The musty scent of decay was overshadowed by a sharp, ozone-like smell, perhaps a product of our shared tension.
Your people,
I said, grasping for some semblance of normalcy in this surreal moment.
Celia, you referred to them as construct humans. What does that mean?
She sighed deeply, the sound heavy with the weight of history and secrets. Her shoulders sagged slightly, as if the burden of knowledge was suddenly too much to bear.
That,
she said, her eyes meeting mine,
is a long story.
I leaned forward, the rough texture of the salvaged bench pressing into my palms. The cool metal grounded me, a reminder of the physical world amidst the whirlwind of revelations.
I have time,
I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice.
I would love to hear your story if you're willing to tell it.
Celia looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. The silence stretched between us, punctuated only by the distant drip of water and the soft rustle of the strange, glowing plants. Finally, she nodded, shifting to make herself more comfortable on the makeshift seat. The movement caused her clothing to shimmer slightly, the fabric catching the dim light in a way that reminded me of fish scales.
Before I tell you,
she said, her voice taking on a more formal tone,
I need to explain some background details to give everything I'm about to say context.
I nodded, settling in. The distant drip of water created an almost meditative rhythm, while the soft glow of the bioluminescent plants cast ever-shifting patterns on the walls. It was as if the very environment was preparing us for the weight of the revelations to come. Celia took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling with the motion. When she spoke, her voice had taken on a rhythmic quality, as if she were reciting information long committed to memory.
As I was told by the researchers back home,
she began,
there exist 4 basic types of humanoid life forms, all descended from humanity.
I leaned in closer, my senses heightened by anticipation. The musty air of the warehouse filled my lungs as I prepared to listen to a story that would undoubtedly change my understanding of the world, and myself, forever. I listened intently as Celia described each type, my mind conjuring images of these diverse descendants of the old world. The warehouse around us seemed to fade into the background, the soft glow of bioluminescent plants creating an almost dreamlike atmosphere.
First, there are the new people, or as they call themselves, the Elwyn,
Celia explained. Her eyes took on a distant look, as if seeing beyond the confines of our dimly lit sanctuary.
Though they descend from humanity, they're what's often referred to as a divergent subspecies. They survived the desolate world after the calamity without any assistance from science.
As she spoke, I recalled the golden-skinned, pointed-eared beings I had encountered. Their otherworldly grace and resilience suddenly made more sense. The air around us seemed to thicken with the weight of this revelation, carrying the faint, sweet scent that I had come to associate with the Elwyn. Celia went on to describe how the Elwyn had drastically diverged due to a combination of genetic mutation and their unique DNA. Her voice, a blend of awe and scientific detachment, echoed softly in the cavernous space.
Many of their descendants originally had enough initial elven DNA to jumpstart the magically empowered genetic adaptation process within the species.
I couldn't hide my confusion any longer and interrupted, my brow furrowing.
Wait, what exactly do you mean by elven DNA?
She paused, her silver hair catching the blue-green light as she tilted her head. Realizing I needed more context, she elaborated.
Elven DNA refers to genetic material that isn't native to Earth. It's ancient, and traces of it have been found in pre-war archaeological sites. This DNA, when exposed to extreme conditions like the radiation from the nuclear apocalypse, became active and allowed the Elwyn to adapt and survive in environments that should have been lethal.
I was stunned, my mind struggling to grasp the implications. The cool metal of the bench beneath me seemed to ground me in reality as I asked,
So you're saying these beings are part alien?
Yes.
She nodded, her purple eyes meeting mine.
In a way, the elven DNA, dormant for millennia, was activated by necessity. It has extraordinary properties that enabled the Elwyn to diverge significantly from the rest of humanity.
She continued, her voice steady but filled with a new urgency.
This unique combination of genetic mutation and elven DNA led them in a completely different direction than the rest of humanity. They developed abilities and traits that set them apart, allowing them to thrive in a world that had become hostile to us.
As she spoke, the enormity of her words sank in. The Elwyn weren't just another species. They were a key to understanding our own potential for adaptation and survival in a drastically changed world. The air in the warehouse seemed to vibrate with the significance of this revelation. Celia then moved on to the second type, her tone carrying a hint of sympathy.
The old men, as the new people refer to them, would be considered normal human beings, ordinary and common.
Her voice echoed softly off the crumbling walls as she described their plight.
They often inhabit the transition zones between the protected city walls and the wild wastelands. Their lifespans are short, and they're not often well suited to survive in this harsh environment, but their numbers are large as they reproduce prolifically.
I nodded, recognizing the description of the people I had grown up among in the wasteland settlements. The memory of their struggles, their short, harsh lives, took on a new poignancy in light of this information.
The third type,
Celia continued, her voice taking on a slightly bitter edge,
are known as the aristocrats. They're made up of the common middle class and the global elite, with the only real difference being the amount of gene editing they've done to themselves.
She explained how gene editing was often quite expensive, limited, and considered a mark of prestige among those classes of humans. The contrast between these privileged few and the struggling masses I had known was stark and unsettling. As I absorbed this information, the divide between the world I had known and the one I was discovering seemed to grow ever wider. The bioluminescent plants pulsed gently, their rhythms seeming to underscore the gravity of Celia's words. Celia's voice grew softer, more personal, as she moved on to the fourth type of humanity. The bioluminescent light cast shifting shadows across her face, highlighting the intensity in her purple eyes.
The last form,
She said, her gaze meeting mine.
Could more accurately be referred to as constructs. We are not born into this world, but made in a lab by gene editing and splicing combined to create the perfect balance of elven and human DNA.
I leaned forward, the rough texture of the salvaged bench pressing into my palms. The air around us seemed to thicken with the weight of her words, carrying the faint, metallic scent of the warehouse mixed with something sweeter, almost alien. The implications of what she was saying were staggering. She wasn't just telling me about her people, she was revealing her own origins.
We possess the strengths of both without any of the weaknesses,
She continued, a hint of pride creeping into her voice. Her silver hair caught the blue-green light, seeming to shimmer as she spoke.
and we have a unique ability to synthesize with the nanosymbiote.
At my questioning look, she elaborated, her fingers tracing abstract patterns on the water skin she held.
The nanosymbiote is a bio-nanomachine made from elven DNA, built specifically for the purpose of hosting a biological artificial intelligence. We construct humans were specifically built for the purpose of combining a balance of human machine and elven DNA.
The concept was almost too much to grasp. My mind reeled, trying to reconcile these fantastical ideas with the harsh reality of the wasteland I had known. Humans created in labs, designed to host artificial intelligences. It sounded like something out of the old world stories Mother used to tell me. Celia must have sensed my bewilderment because her next words took on a more explanatory tone. Her purple eyes softened, showing a glimmer of understanding.
We were created to be the perfect inhabitants not only of this failing world, but also potentially others. The Alliance government wishes to look to the stars for a new home for humanity that may be more suitable, but they couldn't do so without the perfect tools for that purpose. That's why they created us.
As I processed this information, my thoughts turned to my mother. The cool metal of the bench beneath me seemed to ground me as I grappled with the implications. If she was indeed Prime Specimen 2415, what did that make me? The question hung unspoken in the air between us. Celia continued, her voice taking on a note of awe. The bioluminescent plants pulsed gently, casting an ethereal glow on her fair skin as she spoke.
Priscilla had an absorption rate of 92%. Once she received her nanosymbiote, she began to manifest strange powers that many of the scientists did not expect. As a result, they could not control her, and she was able to evade capture. It was thought that she was lost to the radioactive wastelands forever.
The pieces were starting to fall into place. My mother's strange abilities, her insistence on keeping her past a secret, it all made a terrible kind of sense. I could almost feel the weight of this knowledge settling on my shoulders, as tangible as the damp, cool air of the warehouse.
There are 5 series tier types,
Celia said, her voice taking on a more clinical tone as she delved into the specifics of the Construct Human program. She counted them off on her fingers, the movement catching my eye in the dim light.
The Prime series has an 80 to 100% absorption rate. The Elite series, which I belong to, has a 60 to 80% absorption rate. Then there's the Major series at 40 to 60%, the Secondary series at 20 to 40%, and finally the Minimum series at 1 to 20%.
I listened intently, trying to commit these details to memory. Each piece of information felt like a key to unlocking the mystery of my own existence. The distant drip of water echoed through the warehouse, punctuating Celia's words with a rhythmic reminder of our surroundings.
The absorption rate,
Celia explained, leaning in closer, her voice barely above a whisper.
refers to how much of the symbiote they can absorb into their brain. This is a key function in how powerful the symbiote can become when integrated into the human mind.
Celia paused, her expression growing somber. The bioluminescent light cast deep shadows across her face, accentuating the gravity of her next words.
Normal human beings cannot absorb any percentage. The symbiote is often deadly to them, leaving them brain dead and crippled in the best of circumstances. More often than not, they simply die.
The gravity of what she was saying hit me like a physical force. If I was indeed the son of a Prime Series construct, what did that mean for me? Was I carrying within me the potential for these dangerous, powerful abilities? The cool, damp air of the warehouse suddenly felt oppressive, closing in around me as I grappled with these possibilities. Celia continued, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. Her purple eyes seemed to glow in the dim light, reflecting the pulsing rhythm of the bioluminescent plants.
In addition, the symbiote often requires exposure to radiation to power itself and to restore its power reserves. It uses a diamond that is able to generate energy from exposure to radiation. That's why radiation resilience for construct humans is so crucial.
Suddenly, my ability to survive in the highly radioactive areas of the wasteland took on a new significance. The memory of walking through red zones unscathed while others succumbed to radiation sickness flashed through my mind. Was this another sign of my potential heritage? A heavy silence fell between us, broken only by the distant drip of water and the soft rustle of the strange glowing plants. The implications of everything Celia had said were enormous, threatening to reshape my entire understanding of who I was and where I came from.
I don't know how much of this applies to you,
Celia said, her voice gentle. Her fair skin seemed to glow faintly in the dim light, creating an almost otherworldly aura around her.
You were born naturally, and you don't know who your father was. In addition, you've never been tested for nanosymbiotic compatibility.
I hesitated before asking, my voice rough with emotion.
Have you had the nanosymbiosis installed in you?
Celia shook her head, a few strands of silver hair falling across her face.
No, I haven't. The nanosymbiosis is typically installed at age 16 among the construct humans. It's a standard procedure for them, a rite of passage almost. But I was taken by the new people before I reached that age.
She paused, her purple eyes searching my face. The intensity of her gaze made me feel as if she was looking right through me, seeing something I couldn't.
But if what you say is true, and your mother was Prime 2415, that would make you possibly the last of the Prime series. What that may mean is unclear, considering you've never been tested.
I nodded, my mind reeling. The possibility that I might be carrying within me some fraction of these incredible abilities was both exhilarating and terrifying. The warehouse around us seemed to fade away as I grappled with the weight of these revelations. Celia continued, her voice taking on a note of caution. She leaned forward, her clothing shimmering slightly with the movement.
More often than not, humans born from constructs do not inherit the abilities of their construct parents. Rather, they tend to inherit the abilities of the human donor. In addition, most males born amongst them are usually born sterile.
But then her expression changed, becoming more thoughtful. The blue-green light cast intricate patterns across her face as she spoke.
With all that being said, you seem to be different. I can see the strong look of our people about you. In addition, you've already proven your genetic resilience and utility by being able to be here, and you've been able to consume the radiant fruit without death or even sickness.
As she finished speaking, I found myself at a loss for words. The warehouse around us seemed to pulse with the weight of these revelations. Who was I really? What was I capable of? And what did all of this mean for my future? As Celia's words faded into the damp air of the warehouse, I found myself lost in a whirlwind of memories and realizations. The bioluminescent plants pulsed gently, their rhythmic glow mirroring the ebb and flow of my thoughts. My mind drifted back to all the strange occurrences throughout my childhood, moments that had never quite made sense until now. Mother's way of speaking, so precise and often stilted, took on a new light. Her communication style, which I had always attributed to her unique personality, now seemed almost robotic in retrospect. The formal structure of her sentences, the way she would sometimes struggle with casual conversation. It all pointed to an origin far removed from the wasteland settlements I had known. I remembered the subtle glow that sometimes emanated from her skin, a shimmer I had often dismissed as a trick of the light. But as her illness progressed, that glow had intensified, as if she was no longer able to control whatever power lay dormant within her. The memory of her lying in our makeshift home, her body pulsing with an otherworldly light, sent a shiver down my spine.
Guardian of the horizon, bold heart keep rising, through the dark, through the fight, stand tall, shine your light. In that glow, faces lost, you'll never know. Silent tears, courage high, pushing to reach the sky. Over the sun, through the midnight glow, faces lost will never know. Silent tears, courage high, pushing to reach